Marvel's master of multiversal magic. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction, so don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 201 Invitation to the Council. Upon arriving at the hospital, George and Misaka Mikado indeed saw a large group of Misaka sisters lying in hospital beds, undergoing examinations. The Misaka sisters' bodies had been rapidly grown in 14 days using medication, inevitably leading to a host of problems. If they wanted to live like normal people, they needed to undergo examinations. Because it was late, Misaka Mikado had missed the girls' dormitory closing time and, fearing abuse from the terrifying dormitory supervisor if she went back now, decided to spend the night in the hospital bed, waiting for the test results. George naturally stayed at the hospital as well. However, he didn't undergo the same physical examinations as the other Misaka sisters. Regardless of any inherent defects in his body, with the fusion of his different world constitutions, there were generally no problems. But if the hospital were to obtain his current bloodline genes, that could truly cause a major disaster. Putting aside everything else, the wizard bloodline within him alone could drive the scientists of Academy City completely mad. Early the next morning, the hospital's chief physician, Ming-Tu's Huhan, found Misaka Mikado and George. The test results aren't good. Because of the drugs used to accelerate growth, these children's lifespans have been drastically shortened. At the current rate, they'll only live for 2 or 3 years at most. What? Only 2 or 3 years? Misaka Mikado was stunned. So many of her beloved sisters, whom she had worked so hard to save, could only live for 2 or 3 years? How could she accept that? Normally, that's true. However, with regular adjustments and treatments to slow cell division and restore hormone levels, it's possible to return them to normal human lifespan. The doctor's words relieved Misaka Mikado, but her heart tightened again. However, there are too many children. Given the situation in Academy City, there's simply no way to adjust and treat so many children. It would require a huge amount of funding. Indeed, that's over 10,000 Misaka sisters, and they need regular testing and treatment. Fortunately, the council found out about this and is furious that the school's research institution conducted such an experiment without authorization. The council is willing to fund the treatment of these children and will send them to research institutes in various countries for regular check-ups and treatment. I mean, could you finish what you were saying all at once? Misaka Mikado raised an eyebrow, somewhat annoyed. She and Ming-Tu's Huhan were old acquaintances, and Ming-Tu's Huhan had helped her with many things in the past. It was impossible for the council not to know about this experiment. When she looked at the mass production plan for ability users, it clearly stated that it involved using Academy City's strongest supercomputer, the tree diagram designer, to calculate that the mass-produced Misaka sisters would be less than 1% of the original, which is why they abandoned it. And Academy City's strongest supercomputer, the tree diagram designer, could not be used without the permission of the council's higher-ups. So this experiment was originally permitted by the council. Otherwise, with so many battles between Accelerator and the Misaka sisters taking place in Academy City, the Council of Academy City would have been aware of it. But now, none of that matters anymore. Since the council's higher-ups are willing to make amends, that's naturally a good thing. She wasn't worried about the council's higher-ups being hypocritical, sending them abroad to continue their experiments. She would frequently visit the Misaka sisters remaining in Academy City. With the Misaka network, she could keep track of each sister's situation at any time. They are still valuable after all. George wasn't surprised by this result. As long as the Misaka sisters were valuable, the council wouldn't ignore them. He was just a little surprised that they were scattered and sent to research labs abroad. After all, once sent out, getting them back might not be so easy. The Misaka sisters would make new friends in the research labs abroad, and once they got used to local life, it was normal for them not to return. Unless the council's higher-ups had some backup plan to control the Misaka sisters. However, these things didn't matter to him. As long as the council's higher-ups didn't bother him, he naturally wouldn't care anymore. His priority now was to follow Misaka Mikado's main body, find a way to raise his level 4 abilities to level 5, and then look for magic in this world to see if he could learn any valuable magic. I'll come see you when I have time." With the Misaka sisters' matter temporarily resolved, Misaka Mikoto shook hands with George and said goodbye. Her friends must be worried about her not returning home all night, especially her roommate, Shirai Kurako. To her, George was also one of the Misaka sisters, only stronger and more mature. At least he wouldn't criticize her for being childish like Misaka 9982 did. After Misaka Mikoto left, Mitochurugi looked at George and asked, "Are you sure you don't need a physical exam? Even if your ability reaches level 4, your body has still been induced by drugs, so you won't live more than 3 years. No need, I can handle this myself." George again refused Mitochurugi's invitation to check up and then walked out of the hospital alone. Now he had a legitimate identity in Academy City and could move freely within it. Originally, he considered attending Misaka Mikoto's Tokiwade Middle School, where he could learn about developing his abilities and further master them through contact with Misaka Mikoto. However, after thinking about it, he felt it would be too inefficient. With his brain, the pace of a normal student's class was too slow. It would be better to get some relevant materials and study on his own. If he didn't understand something, he could find a professional to tutor him. Anyway, there were plenty of scientists in Academy City. As for contacting Misaka Mikoto, she often came to the hospital to see the Misaka sisters, and she was easy to find in Tokiwaban. There would be plenty of opportunities to contact her. "Sir, if you have something to say, come out and say it. If you keep hiding and following me, I'll deal with you." Not long after leaving the hospital, George stopped and turned around to look behind him. With his mental abilities, no matter how good the other party's tracking skills were, it would be useless. Sure enough, a moment later, a blond young man wearing a white coat with half of his face covered by tattoos came out from behind a large tree by the roadside. "Your clone is quite interesting. You're much more vigilant than the original. Are you from the council?" George raised an eyebrow. Having already guessed the other party's identity, he was different from the other Misaka sisters. The council wouldn't let him go so easily. If they couldn't use force, they would definitely use softer methods, which was within his expectations. Very clever. "Kohara Kazuta, the leader of the Hound unit directly under the council, wants to invite you to join our unit. I wonder if you would be willing," the blonde-haired youth revealed a slightly manic smile. Chapter 202 Initial Mastery of Transformation. Zzzzz. George stomped his foot, and a surge of electricity instantly struck Kohara Kazuta along the ground, causing his entire body to shudder. His blonde hair, which had been styled on his back, suddenly stood on end, and his legs went weak. "What do you mean by this?" Kohara Kazuta quickly reached out to steady himself against a nearby tree, his face darkening as he looked at George. George replied calmly, "Nothing much, it's just that your smile was so ugly that I couldn't help myself. You should smile less like that in the future, or you might get beaten to death. Tell me, what benefits are there for inviting me to join? Hello, you've got personality. We can help you quickly advance from level 4 to level 5. Does that count as a benefit?" Kohara Kazuta suppressed his anger and calmed himself down before speaking. Based on the combat performance of Clone 9981 and Atomic Collapse, he likely possessed the potential to reach level 5. With proper development, he could potentially advance in less than 6 months. This would give Academy City another level 5, and a highly skilled one at that. Therefore, the chairman personally ordered him to find a way to control Clone 9981 at all costs. As a member of the fanatical Kohara clan, he had a great interest in such a powerful clone resulting from mutation, and was naturally very willing to take on this mission. As a scientist, he always believed that science is power, and even the most powerful ability users have weaknesses. The most important thing is to spend time carefully observing and analyzing. Even Accelerator's defensive reflexes could be easily broken if prepared in advance. As long as Clone 9981 was willing to join them, he could find its weaknesses and control it to become the most powerful weapon in the Curious Squad. Not bad, George nodded slightly upon hearing this. Originally, he planned to just give this person a few perfunctory words and send him away, but now he felt that perhaps it was worth a try. If there was anyone in the entire Academy City who understood ability users best and knew best how to quickly develop their potential and fully develop their abilities to the limit, it would undoubtedly be the Council. After all, they were the ones who built the entire Academy City, and they were also the ones who established the entire ability user ranking system. If the council is willing to fully support him in advancing from level 4 to level 5, it will be significantly faster than him learning and figuring it out on his own. He can also take this opportunity to infiltrate the council, see what it's all about, and use their information to gain a clearer understanding of this world. As for whether he'll be walking into a trap, he's confident. So far, they only know him as a level 4 clone with strong combat abilities, and are completely unaware of his magical abilities. Besides that, if you have any other requests, feel free to mention them. Seeing that George seemed somewhat interested, Kazuda immediately added fuel to the fire. George didn't mince words. First, the salary and benefits must be plentiful. Second, I can go to your place whenever I want, or not, according to my schedule. Third, I'll accept your missions depending on the situation. If they cross my moral boundaries, I won't do them. You have quite a few demands. No problem, I can agree. Kazuda's lips twitched, but he still nodded in agreement. The main priority now is to get Clo 9981 into the unit. Once they're in, there'll be plenty of time to figure out how to develop them. Let's go to Hound Squad headquarters. I'll tailor a plan to help you advance to level 5 Esper status as quickly as possible, based on your situation. He pressed a button, and a black sedan quickly pulled up to the side of the road. George didn't hesitate and got in with Kahara. While George was joining the horror squad as Misaka 9981, a major event was unfolding in the fairy tale world. Transform. In the fairy tale mage guild hall, George stood at the bar, casting a transformation spell. A blue magic circle lit up above his head, and in the blink of an eye, his golden cat-like body transformed into the human George he envisioned from the main world. Looks like I'm still a bit lacking. George stood at the bar, looking at himself in the mirror he had prepared beforehand, and couldn't help but shake his head. He had already mastered some parts of the transformation, but the overall transformation still had some issues. In the mirror, he did indeed transform into human, but only in appearance. His size remained unchanged, still only slightly larger than a palm, not a normal human size. Therefore, his transformation spell had a minor flaw. It's already very good. You've only been learning for a short time, and you've already achieved this. With more practice, you'll quickly master the basic transformation spell, Mira Jane encouraged him, wiping her wineglass. I understand. By the way, is the president not here today? George nodded, reverting to his normal cat form. Before mastering advanced transformation spells, using them would only allow him to unleash a small portion of his power, so he normally remained in cat form. In this world's magic system, transformation spells are easy to learn but difficult to master. It's said that if one cultivates transformation spells to the highest level, one can transform into almost anything, plants, animals, insects, etc., easily changing, a magical version of the 72 transformations. Of course, whatever it transforms into, it only retains its form. Becoming a demon doesn't grant demonic power, that's an effect only gained through receiving magic. The guildmaster went to the large-scale magical artifact manufacturing company to discuss the modification of the moving castle, Mira Jane replied. After defeating the Phantom Lord, Makarov, at George's suggestion, accepted the trophy, the moving castle. However, due to limited guild funds, they couldn't afford the high costs of modification, so it remained as a decoration in the lake next to the guild. Fortunately, Fairy Tail's reputation within the kingdom's guild soared again after defeating Phantom Lord, leading to an increase in quest postings. Furthermore, George could now upright and help repair damage caused by vandalism, gradually increasing the guild's funds. Now, they finally had enough to cover the initial payment for the moving castle's modification. Therefore, Makarov personally delivered the moving castle to the large-scale magical artifact manufacturing company today. Why don't I see Natsu and the others? They haven't taken on any missions lately, have they? George turned his head and looked around the guild hall, noticing that Natsu, Gray, and the others, who are usually the most boisterous, were also absent. Normally, by this time, the guild hall should be mostly broken and waiting for him to repair it. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203 Our System and Magical Spirit Power. They seem to have gone to the Arcane Resort Paradise. Loki gave them some vouchers for the Arcane Resort Paradise's luxury hotel. By the way, you've been buried in the library these past few days, so you probably didn't know Loki was a celestial spirit, did you? Mira Jane told George with a smile what had happened in the past few days. It turns out that Loki's real name is Leo, and he's not human, but the Leo celestial spirit, the first of the 12 zodiac signs. Because he was dissatisfied with a previous celestial spirit mage Colin's mistreatment of celestial spirits, he forcibly stayed in the human world, preventing Colin from summoning other celestial spirits to fight, which led to her death in a mission. This also resulted in him being punished by the Celestial Spirit King and forbidden from returning to the celestial spirit world. After that, he stayed in the human world, disguised as a human holder-type mage, and joined the Fairy Tale Guild. Celestial spirits cannot stay in the human world for long. They need to return to the celestial spirit world from time to time to replenish their magic power, otherwise they will perish due to the depletion of magic power. Loki was powerful, but he had persisted until now and was already at his last gasp. After learning of Loki's situation, celestial spirit mage Lucy summoned the Celestial Spirit King, pleading with him to lift Loki's punishment and make him her celestial spirit. Loki's a celestial spirit? George was astonished. He hadn't noticed before. I missed a good show. I wonder what the Celestial Spirit King looks like. Not seeing the Celestial Spirit King, the ruler of the celestial spirit realm, left him with a slight sense of regret. He had read about the Celestial Spirit King in the library's celestial spirit-related magic books. It was said that this ruler of the celestial spirit realm was incredibly powerful. But Lucy actually summoned the Celestial Spirit King. Very few celestial spirit mages in human history have been able to do that. Mirajan. Just as George was pondering matters related to the Celestial Spirit King, the magic crystal ball on the bar suddenly lit up, and the figure of a withered, thin old man appeared on it. Counselor Yajima. Mirajan put down his glass, picked up the crystal ball, and looked surprised. Counselor Yajima, a former fairy tale mage and a close friend of Guildmaster Makarov, was instrumental in many of the fairy tale-related incidents that happened on the council's side. A hostage situation occurred last night at the Arcane Resort Paradise. According to witnesses, Urza Scarlet was kidnapped, and the destination was a small island off the coast of Keylthus. The mastermind behind this hostage situation is a dark mage named Jelil, who is building the R system on the island with a group of dark mages, intending to use it to resurrect Zareth, the progenitor of dark mages. The kingdom's army was completely wiped out. At Councillor Zekelin's suggestion, the council is preparing to use magical spirit power to launch a devastating attack on the island. There are only 25 minutes left. Get Makarov to find a way to rescue Urza within those 25 minutes, Yajima said solemnly. Urza was kidnapped to the island, so Natsu and the others would definitely chase after her. If they didn't leave the island within 25 minutes, they would all be reduced to ashes by the magical spirit power. In the vote on magical spirit power, he was the only one who voted against it. The other councillors, fearing Zareth's resurrection, all voted in favor. What? Mira Jane's expression changed drastically upon hearing this, and she turned to George anxiously, saying, George, go to Calem quickly, find Urza and the others, and tell them to leave that island immediately. The Guildmaster wasn't in Fairy Tale, and even if you were, it wouldn't matter. The Guildmaster couldn't get to Calem within 25 minutes. Only George, who knew special magic, could do it. Mira Jane, don't panic. Tell me what the R system and magical spirit power are, because he had been helping the guild's mages put out fires every day. He had been to almost every city in the kingdom, including the coastal city of Calem. So, with a simple apparition, he could get there instantly. Now he needed to figure out the specifics of the situation so he could handle it more effectively later. Mira Jane didn't waste any time and quickly explained it to George. The R system was an evil dark magic created by the progenitor of black magic, capable of resurrecting the dead. A black magic cult once built 7 R systems on an island near Keylthus in an attempt to resurrect Zareth. Later, the entire Magic Council mobilized and destroyed all 7 unfinished R systems. Before Urza joined the Fairy Tale Guild, she was one of the slaves captured by the black magic cult to build R systems. As for magical energy, also known as super time-space destruction magic, it was the Magic Council's ultimate weapon for maintaining order in the magical world. It was a super destructive magic that used a satellite magic circle to accurately launch a massive energy projectile, incorporating 2.7 billion units of conceptual magic power, to any location in the world. If used properly, its power was enough to destroy an entire country, making it extremely terrifying. Like a nuclear bomb in modern society, probably even more terrifying than a nuclear bomb, but even a single nuclear bomb can't destroy a country, George immediately understood. He turned to look at the guild hall, then paraded away. He originally wanted to find a few more guild mages to help, but found that the strongest Urza and the others were already there, and the others with slightly better strength were all on missions. The remaining mages in the guild hall would not only be useless, but probably also a burden. So in the end, he decided to go alone. The main purpose of this trip was not to defeat the powerful black mage group that kidnapped Urza, but to rescue Urza and the others, and get them away from the island to avoid being accidentally injured by the council's magical spirit power. As long as he could find Urza and the others, this mission wouldn't be too difficult for him, nor would it be too dangerous. Apparition and Mirror World could both help him easily evade the magical spirit attacks. Above Keelam City, as soon as George's figure appeared, he immediately spread his wings and flew rapidly towards the depths of the sea, following the direction given by Counselor Ajima. Apparition only works for places you've been before. For places you haven't been, you still have to rely on wings magic to fly there. Fortunately, at full speed, his speed wasn't slow. Before long, a small island with a strange tower appeared before him. Seeing the broken ships bearing the kingdom's flags floating near the island, he knew he hadn't made a mistake. Invisibility. Drawing his wand and casting an invisibility spell on himself, George activated a tracking spell and flew towards the tower's gate, following the footprints that appeared on the island. Being able to kidnap Urza, an S-class mage, meant the other party was definitely powerful. It was best to be careful. I've had some family matters lately, so updates haven't been frequent. I'll update more frequently once things are settled in the next couple of days. Chapter 204 Eat Me Electromagnetic Cannon. It's Natsu and Gray's magic. Arriving near the tower's gate, George found all the guards had been subdued. The magical marks on their bodies indicated Natsu's Dragon Slayer magic and Gray's ice magic. Looks like Natsu and Gray are here too. Lucy and Happy are probably here too. He wasn't particularly happy that Natsu and the others had caught up with him on the island before him. Instead, he felt a headache coming on. If it were just Urza, he could use a tracking spell to find her, then simply apparate with her. The strength of those dark mages was irrelevant to him. Magical spirits would teach them a lesson. But now, Natsu and the others were all inside the tower, and probably not even all together. Finding them one by one and then taking them away would be a hassle. Oh well, what can I do? I'm going to be the next guild master's cat. I can't just ignore the mages in my own guild. George shook his head and flapped his wings, flying into the tower. But as soon as he entered, he heard a man's voice simultaneously echoing from every place within the tower marked with sound incantations. Welcome to the Tower of Paradise. I am Gerald, the ruler of this tower. Both sides' pieces are ready. Let's begin the Paradise game. The Tower of Paradise? The Paradise game. George listened to the announcement, which sounded like a magical broadcast, and wondered what tricks this Gerald was up to. The rules of the game are simple. I will use Urza as a living sacrifice to perform a ritual to resurrect Zareth, the progenitor of dark mages. In other words, I win as soon as the gate to paradise opens. And if you can stop this, then you win. The voice paused, then chuckled. However, if it were just that simple, it would be too boring. So I'll arrange for 3 S-rank mages from the Skull Guild to hunt you down. Only by defeating them can you reach me and stop me from resurrecting Zareth. Oh, and a word of warning. The Magic Council is preparing the ultimate destructive magic spirit power, capable of destroying everything. So you'd better hurry. Otherwise, everyone will be reduced to ashes and disappear from this world under the power of magic spirit power. Wait a minute, how does this guy know the Magic Council has activated magic spirit power? George frowned after listening to Jelil's broadcast throughout the tower. He had discovered the key point. He knew the council was preparing magical spirit power because of a notification from Counselor Ajima. How did Jelil, here at the tower, know about the council's decision? Could he be a spy within the council? If so, why would he do this knowing the council would unleash magical spirit power? It's practically suicide. Finally, and most importantly, after hiding the R system's development for so many years, suddenly causing such a commotion at the resort feels very deliberate, like a deliberate exposure. There must be some conspiracy involved. It's not as simple as it seems. Find them first, regardless of their schemes. Rescuing them is paramount. Following the trail left by the tracking spell, George flapped his wings and chased after Urza. He'd find Urza first. If they were together, he'd take them all. If not, he'd send Urza away first, then use the tracking spell to find the others one by one. Following the passageways within the tower, past the corpses of guards, he suddenly stopped upon reaching the 6th floor. He heard a familiar scream. Ah! 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 It's Lucy. Flying towards the direction of the scream, he found Lucy, the first fairy tale member, in the central hall of the 6th floor. However, Lucy was clearly in poor condition. Her top was torn in half, forcing her to kneel on the ground, covering herself with her hands to prevent any exposure. Behind her stood Juvia, one of the former Phantom Lords. Juvia was wielding a water whip, whipping Lucy's buttocks repeatedly as if having a mental breakdown. Behind Juvia was a punk-dressed mage frantically playing a magical guitar. It's mind control magic. As a psychic, George was extremely sensitive to mental magic. He could clearly sense the guitar-playing mage controlling Juvia to attack Lucy with the sound of the guitar. So this is one of the 3 S-class mages Gerald mentioned. He's certainly got some skill. George secretly took out a copper coin from his changing space. Juvia, also an S-class mage, was being controlled like a puppet. The S-class mages in the Tower of Paradise were far stronger than ordinary S-class mages. He couldn't be careless. So, to save time, he chose to become invisible and ambush the enemy. Eat my electromagnetic cannon. The copper coin bounced up, unleashing a burst of 200 million volts. A cat paw lightly touched the falling coin, and it instantly transformed into a supersonic electromagnetic cannon, shooting towards the guitar mage's head. Since he was an enemy, there was no need to hold back, a direct hit to the vitals. What? The guitar mage, who was controlling Juvia with sound magic, was immediately alarmed by the powerful electric current that suddenly appeared on the other side of the hall. However, the electromagnetic cannon attack came too fast. He didn't have time to control Juvia to defend with water magic. He could only flick his hair, using his unique hair magic to create a defense in front of him. Boom! The supersonic electromagnetic cannon slammed into the hair, which was brimming with magical energy. After pausing for less than a second, it pierced through the hair and struck the guitar mage between the eyebrows. The guitar mage was sent flying, crashing heavily into the wall behind him, shattering most of it. The sound magic was interrupted, and Juvia, an S-class mage, broke free of control and returned to normal. Lucy, I'm sorry, I couldn't control my body just now. Are you alright, Juvia, now back to normal, rushed to Lucy and helped her up. At this moment, the guitar mage also stood up, clutching his forehead, which was now swollen with a large bump. Despicable. He actually ambushed me from the shadows. If he hadn't used his hair to block the attack, his head would have been blown off on the spot. My beautiful hair. Damn it, I'll kill you. Discovering that a section of his beautiful long hair was missing, looking like it had been chewed by a dog, the guitar mage was instantly enraged. He picked up his guitar, ready to unleash a powerful attack, using his sound to control all the mages present in the hall. The mage who just launched the sneak attack is nowhere to be found, but as long as the opponent hears the sound of his guitar, they will not be able to escape his control. Chapter 205 The Overlord's Hair Loss Curse. Unfortunately, before the guitar mage could even launch his weapon, a beam of red light shot towards him from behind. Expelliarmus, it was George who, after firing his electromagnetic cannon, immediately circled behind the guitar mage and used the disarming spell to knock the magical device from his hand. So you were behind me. Die? The guitar being forcibly knocked away enraged the guitar mage, but his reaction was swift. He used his unique hair magic, controlling his hair to grow rapidly, cascading towards George like a waterfall. He knew that attackers could become invisible, but his previous attack had revealed his location. Quick hair loss, however, facing the onslaught of hair, George simply raised his wand and easily cast a hair loss spell. The hair loss spell, as the name suggests, is a spell that causes hair to fall out instantly. George also called it the Overlord hair loss spell. This spell, like the dancing spell, the armpit spell, and the snot spell, is a prank spell and doesn't cause any harm. But its use here was perfect. Sure enough, the wildly raging hair, after being struck by the hair loss curse, paused in midair for a few seconds before falling limply to the ground. The guitar mage's head, which had been flowing with long hair, became smooth and shiny. My hair. How could the world have such vicious magic? For the guitar mage, whose hair was everything, Touching his bald head felt like his entire world had collapsed. Before the guitar mage could even recover from the shock of losing his hair, he was enveloped in high-voltage electricity and knocked unconscious. Petrify, revealing his true form and casting 2 more spells on the guitar mage, George put him in a box and tossed him into the costume-changing space. He was intrigued by magic that used music to control others as puppets to fight for him, a magic he hadn't seen in fairy tales library. "George, you're here." "That's great." Seeing George appear, Lucy finally breathed a sigh of relief. After the Phantom Lord's attack, all the fairy tale mages had a great deal of trust in George, and Lucy was no exception. Restored to its original state, George cast a restoration spell on Lucy, restoring her clothes, which were almost torn to shreds from the battle, and asked, "What exactly happened here? Where are Urza and the others?" Urza was sealed in a card by her former comrades, and now, Lucy, rubbing her red bottom from the water whip, recounted the whole story. A few days ago, they arrived at the resort with a hotel voucher given to them by Loki, where they encountered Juvia, one of the former 4 Phantom Lords. Everything was fine, and everyone was having a great time. However, last night, several mages suddenly attacked them. Because their magic was very unique, they were caught off guard and all fell victim to it. Urza and Happy were also kidnapped. Later, they escaped, caught up with the mages, came to this island, defeated the guards, and entered the tower. After that, they encountered Urza, who had already escaped. Through Urza, they learned that she had once been a slave building the tower, and later, together with Jelil and their companions, they rebelled and defeated the dark mages who had enslaved them. However, just as they were preparing to leave, Jelil's personality inexplicably changed. He used the lives of all his companions as leverage to banish Urza, deceiving them into believing that Urza had betrayed them. He then tricked them into continuing to build the tower, creating a free paradise. The mages who attacked them last night were Urza's former companions from her time as a slave. Urza had deliberately allowed herself to be captured so she could return to the island and uncover Jelil's true intentions. When those companions learned the truth, one of them, named Hugh, to protect Urza from Jelil, seized the opportunity when Urza was off guard and sealed her with his playing cards, determined to defeat Jelil alone. So the group split up. Hugh took Urza to the top floor to duel Jelil. Gray and another of Urza's childhood friends, Simon, chased after them to stop them, and Lucy and Juvia went to find Natsu, who had initially rushed into the tower to save Happy. It seems things are complicated. Let's go find Natsu first, then reunite with Urza and the others to leave this place. George originally wanted to apprehend Lucy and Juvia out first, but considering the strangeness of the whole situation, and the 2 S-class enemies and Jelil of unknown strength in the Tower of Paradise, he felt it was better to reunite first and then leave together. After defeating the guitar mage, he had already been exposed to Jelil's sight, and having another ally would be more helpful when encountering enemies. Juvia was, after all, an S-class mage, and could be a great help in combat. Lucy herself wasn't very strong, but her celestial spirits were still useful. According to her, there was a celestial spirit named Aquarius, whose strength was no less than that of an average S-class mage, but she had a bad temper and attacked indiscriminately, and she dared not summon her unless it was a matter of life and death. Footprint manifestation, Natsu, with a tracking charm temporarily targeting Natsu, George, Lucy, and Juvia set off again. The Tower of Paradise was hundreds of meters high, with dozens of floors, and its interior was intricate and complex. Without the tracking charm, finding someone would have been very difficult. They actually lost. The fairy tale restoration mage has also arrived. This is getting more and more interesting. At the top of the tower, Jelil, sitting on his throne, rested his chin on one hand and flicked the chess piece symbolizing the guitar mage off the board with the other. For him, the outcome of the battle below is unimportant. As a manifestation of half his power, he could become one of the kingdom's 10 great saint mages, and he believed he could easily defeat all the fairy tale mages below. Even if they added a cat with S-class mage strength, the result would be the same. The reason he hadn't made a move was simply because waiting was too boring. He wanted to kill time by playing a game before the magical spirit power completely helped him complete the R system. This is still too slow. Anticipating 15 minutes until the magical spirit power attack, George, with Lucy in one hand and Juvia in the other, rushed out of the tower and flew upwards in a straight line. After determining Natsu's floor, he used an explosion charm to create a hole in the tower and rushed inside. What the hell is that? Upon entering the tower, they saw a very bizarre creature. It was a creature with a strong human body and an owl's head. Crucially, the owl's head had short, cherry red hair, which looked about 80% similar to Natsu's. What puzzled George most was that the final target shown by his tracking charm was this bizarre creature. Chapter 206 Urza's Cleansing Garment. Roar of the Fire Dragon, Ice Model, Assault Rifle. The Owlman unleashed a Dragon Slayer flame, while Gray used Ice Model. The two clashed, fire and ice clashing. Beside them stood Urza's injured childhood friends, Simon and Happy. Simon, what's going on? Weren't you chasing after Hugh and Urza? And Happy, where's Natsu? Lucy stared in shock at the Owlman using Dragon Slayer magic, completely bewildered. Only Natsu knew Fire Dragon Slayer magic, and that tuft of hair resembled Natsu's, but what was with the owl's head? Lucy, Natsu got eaten by that owl, Happy cried loudly. Simon, clutching his stomach, knelt on the ground and explained, he's not Natsu, he's Owl, one of the 3 crows of the Skull Guild, an S-rank mage. He possesses the terrifying ability to absorb the magic of his enemies by eating them. In 10 minutes, I'll completely digest the fire dragon Natsu, and I'll gain the power of Dragon Slayer magic again. The Owlman, having suppressed Gray with flames, let out a smug, cackling laugh. George wanted to intervene, but Juvia, who liked Gray, saw him suppressed by the flames and charged forward with a shout. Lord Gray, I'm here to help you. Water slash. Several sharp water blades slashed towards the Owlman, who quickly dodged. Juvia is an S-rank mage. Those water blades could easily slice through rock, and if hit, her body would be instantly cut into several pieces. Well done, Juvia. Seeing the Owlman's opening while dodging the water blade, Gray quickly set up a cannon, ice shape, ice cannon. An avalanche-like force erupted from the cannon, sending the Owlman crashing through several walls, collapsing dazed to the ground, vomiting up Natsu. Judging from the outside magic guild, Gray possessed the strength of an S-class mage. 2 S-class mages, combined with ice and water, their destructive power was naturally extraordinary. Ice shape can also be added to the list of spells to learn. George nodded secretly, observing the power of the ice cannon. Back in his Marvel home world, he had just crafted a new wand using the World Tree and the heart nerves of the Frost Giant King. Besides the normal 25x magic bonus, it also provided an additional boost to ice magic. If he could learn the ice cannon and unleash it with his wand later, its power would probably be no different from a real avalanche. The magical spirit power will launch in 10 minutes. Lucy, you and Simon go and take Urza's other friends out of the tower and wait for us on the sea outside the island. Happy, grab Natsu and come with me to find Urza. Seeing that Natsu was only slightly dizzy and not seriously injured, George quickly made arrangements. Simon was injured by the owl and couldn't be of much help, so it was better to let him gather his companions and leave first. Lucy's Aquarius celestial spirit could unleash its full power at sea, so it could wait at sea first. He would take Natsu, Gray, and Juvia, who all had S-class strength, to find Urza. With so many S-class beings together, they could quickly resolve any trouble they encountered. Okay, be careful. Lucy helped the injured Simon up and headed down the tower. Happy grabbed Natsu, and George grabbed Gray and Juvia, and they flew out of the tower again, flying upwards in a straight line. Following the tracking charm, they arrived at a tower level near the top. It should be here, George pointed ahead with his wand curled around his tail. Thunderous explosion. Another hole was blasted in the sturdy tower. It has to be said, this explosion charm is absolutely masterful at demolishing buildings. This tower, which took 8 years to build, is no ordinary structure. It incorporates a large amount of magical materials and is inscribed with numerous magical runes, making its exterior walls exceptionally sturdy. Ordinary magic probably wouldn't even break through its defenses. Only the explosion charm's special effect on buildings, combined with the wand's amplification, could blast such a large hole. Wow! As soon as they entered through the blasted hole, George, Natsu, and Gray couldn't help but exclaim in amazement. This level of the Tower of Paradise was incredibly spacious, a vast space. A bridge ran through it, leading to the entrance to the top floor. Guarding this bridge was Ikaruga, the strongest of the 3 crows, a transformation-type mage. She was a woman dressed in a cherry blossom kimono and wielding a red magical longsword. The 3's wow wasn't for the space or Ikaruga herself, but for Urza, who stood opposite Ikaruga. When they rushed in, they saw Urza, clad in her infernal armor, have her armor shattered by Ikaruga. That fleeting moment was truly astounding. But it was only for a moment, because after her armor was destroyed, Urza changed into new clothes. This time, however, she wasn't wearing armor, but only a breast wrap and two long swords. Urza, need help? George and the others landed behind Urza. The mage who could shatter the magical armor of a top-tier S-rank mage like Urza was no pushover. George, you're here too, Urza nodded to George, no need. Let me handle this myself. Against such a powerful opponent, I shouldn't defend. Only by opening my mind and attacking with all my might can I win. Let's settle this with one strike. With a flash, Urza gathered all her magic power into her two long swords and charged towards Ikaruga. Ikaruga also drew her sword to meet Urza's attack. The two seemed to have missed each other in midair for a split second, but in reality, they had exchanged over 100 blows. You really have something, Fairy Queen Urza. Upon landing, Ikaruga muttered, her magic sword shattering with a crash, and she collapsed to the ground, lifeless. In that brief exchange, she had been struck in a vital spot by Urza, who only attacked and didn't defend. Urza, the magical energy will be launched in 8 minutes. It's time to leave. Seeing Urza defeat Ikaruga, George stepped forward and said. Urza shook her head again. George, you take them away from here first. Today, I must settle things with Jello. I need to find out why he did this. Don't worry, as long as I stop him within 8 minutes, all his plans will fail. She still couldn't understand why the kind of unreliable Jello had suddenly changed so drastically. Okay, seeing the determination in Urza's eyes, George knew that no matter what he said, Urza wouldn't leave with him. She had probably already decided to die with Jello. He reached out to stop Natsu and the others from objecting, and the instant Urza turned around, he cast a spell on her. Faint. Chapter 207 Magic Crystals to Enhance Meditation Efficiency. Urza isn't like Natsu or Gagiel, she lacks the magic resistance of a Dragon Slayer mage. Caught off guard, she was struck by George's stun spell and immediately lost consciousness. Juvia, take Urza. Let's get out of here. The magic spirit power's activation time is estimated to be only 5 minutes, sending Urza to fight Jello was clearly an unwise decision. Taking everyone to fight Jello was equally unwise. Jello could command an S-ranked mage as strong as Ikaruga, his strength was immense, possibly even a saint-level mage. Moreover, he had clearly been brewing some huge conspiracy. Continuing to follow his script without knowing anything, and with a threat of magic spirit power, would be foolish. First, leave the Tower of Paradise, out of the magic spirit power's attack range, and then wait to see what happens next. If Jello and the Tower of Paradise were blasted into thin air by the magic spirit power, that would be perfect. If not, they would adapt to the situation accordingly. If they could win, they would fight. If not, they would run. The kingdom had so many magic guilds, so many powerful mages, and quite a few of the 10 wizard saints, the tall ones could handle things. There was no need to throw their lives away needlessly. He didn't like fighting battles he wasn't confident of winning. If Jello really needed Urza's body as a vessel for Zeraph's resurrection and left the Tower of Paradise to chase them, then fighting outside was better than fighting inside. At least the enemy would lose their home field advantage, and they would no longer be threatened by the power of magical spirits. Taking out a box that had been expanded using the unseen stretch charm, George put Urza and the others inside and apparated directly to the sea outside the island. At this time, Lucy and Simon, along with Urza's 2 childhood friends, Whirly and Miliana, left the tower and boarded a small boat on the open sea. Restored to its original state, he used the restoration charm on a large kingdom ship that had been magically destroyed at sea, and soon a brand new ship appeared on the ocean. After releasing Urza and the others, and picking up Lucy and the others, George lifted the stun spell from Urza. The group stood on the deck, looking towards the Tower of Paradise. Urza, there's less than a minute until the magic spirit power is launched. Let's watch from here. Jellard, Urza, now fully conscious, knew she wouldn't make it in time even if she went now, and could only sigh silently. Meanwhile, on the top floor of the Tower of Paradise, Jellard flicked all the chess pieces off the table and went to the window. Never mind, I'll deal with you guys after the Tower of Paradise is completely finished. The R system required an enormous amount of magical power to be fully completed, something even he, as one of the 10 wizard saints, could achieve. He could only rely on the magic spirit power, the ultimate weapon of the council. Therefore, several years ago, He had divided half of his magical power to create a thought entity, using the alias Zekrine, and joined the council, becoming one of its members with the strength of one of the 10 wizard saints. The thought entity proposed using magic spirit power to prevent Zeref's resurrection in the council, precisely to allow the Tower of Paradise to absorb the 2.7 billion conceptual magical power launched by the magic spirit power. Afterwards, he could use Urza's body, that of an S-class mage, to revive Zeref. Originally, he was waiting for Urza to come to him, and then, once the R system was fully completed, he would begin reviving Zeref. The plan had changed, but it wouldn't significantly affect anything. Once the R system was complete, he would retrieve his mental form from the council, regain his full strength, and personally bring Urza back. What terrifying magic power! Looking at the several layers of enormous golden magic circles that suddenly appeared above the Tower of Paradise, George and everyone on the ship showed expressions of horror. They had all heard of the Council's ultimate destructive magic, magic spirit power, but this was the first time they had seen it with their own eyes. Faced with a massive satellite magic in the sky, and the 2.7 billion conceptual magical powers gathered there, everyone felt their own insignificance. Boom! A golden, almost tangible pillar of light erupted from the enormous golden magic circles, directly slamming into the Tower of Paradise. Instantly, the entire sky was enveloped in white light, and everyone involuntarily closed their eyes. How could this be? However, after the white light that illuminated the entire world subsided, the Tower of Paradise did not disappear, but transformed into a gigantic magical crystal tower 100 meters tall. There was definitely something wrong. George looked at the magical crystal tower filled with magical power, his face not showing too much surprise. He knew the council's plan might fail when he realized Jelil hadn't pursued him and hadn't left the Tower of Paradise when the magical spirit power was launched. Jelil must have had a way to neutralize the magical spirit power attack. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been foolish enough to wait to die inside the Tower of Paradise. So that's how it is. His Tower of Paradise wasn't even completed. He needed the magical spirit power to fully complete it. Urza also realized this. She had been a slave who built the Tower of Paradise herself, and she wasn't completely ignorant of it. 8 years ago, the Black Mage Group built 8 towers simultaneously to better collect magical power and activate the R system. However, Jelil only built one. How could he claim to have completed the R system? She had previously been stuck in a dead end, not thinking in this direction. All was focused on reaching the top to settle things with Jelil. Now, seeing the magic crystal tower, she finally understood. So the R system is only now complete. Hearing Urza's explanation, everyone finally understood Jelil's true purpose. Such a large magic crystal. If used for meditation, wouldn't my magic level skyrocket? George's eyes shone brighter as he looked at the immense magic emanating from the crystal. The meditation technique he learned in the Mage Apprentice world involved absorbing external power through mental energy, converting it into magic power, and storing it within the body to increase one's mage level. This was somewhat similar to cultivation in mythology. Once one's magic level exceeded 500, one could essentially achieve immortality. Merlin's ring and Morgana's ring could both gather surrounding power, increasing the speed of meditation. The higher the concentration of surrounding power, the greater the efficiency of meditation. If he could meditate using Morgana's ring inside this magic crystal tower, his meditation efficiency might increase tenfold. So at this point, he had already decided that no matter how strong Jelil was, he had to defeat him today and take the magic crystal tower for himself. Fortunately, his side was also quite strong, with himself, the top-tier S-rank Urza, the S-rank Natsu, Gray, and Juvia, and Lucy who could summon S-rank celestial spirits to help in battle on the high seas. Chapter 208 True Celestial Magic. Urza, whom I once loved so deeply, offer your body for my ideals. Jelil had appeared above the large ship without anyone noticing. Urza conjured 2 magic swords and charged forward. Jero, you damned bastard, lie down. This magical power is stronger than Joseph's, definitely at the level of the 10 wizard saints. George frowned. He had guessed Jelil would be strong, but he hadn't expected him to be stronger than Joseph, whom they had fought last time. Last time, they had to rely on the entire guild of mages to defeat Joseph, and even then, Natsu's use of fiend fire had significantly depleted Joseph's magical power. Attacked together, Urza alone was no match, so George spread his wings and charged forward, with Natsu, Gray, and Juvia following closely behind. Simon and the others were injured and unable to help, So Lucy took out the celestial spirit key of Aquarius. "Just you guys." Zeraf's face showed disdain, and he vanished into thin air in a flash. Meteor, not disappearing, just moving too fast. George, with his extraordinary visual perception, saw Jello enveloped in starlight, his speed increasing like a meteor. He first dodged Urza's strongest sword technique that had destroyed Ikaruga, then kicked Natsu and Grey down with a single kick. However, when attacking Juvia, his body was quickly hydrated to dodge. 7-star sword, 7 stars appeared behind Jello, crashing down on the hydrated Juvia with lightning speed. Juvia, who had dodged the physical attack, was directly knocked into the sea by this magical attack. Railgun, a coin carrying a massive current shot towards Jello's back. The moment he saw Jello's movement, George also made his move. "This kind of attack can't hurt me." Jello turned around and, with his fist enveloped in starlight, actually shattered the railgun with a single punch, then transformed into a streak of light and charged towards George. A level 4 electromagnetic cannon is still too weak for a level 10 wizard. If it were Misaka Mikado's 3x supersonic electromagnetic cannon, Jello probably wouldn't dare to take it directly with his fists. Transform. Jello's speed was too fast. Apart from the electromagnetic cannon, other magic was difficult to hit. So, George's body immediately emitted a magic circle, transforming from a palm-sized golden kitten into a 10-meter-tall giant cat. Electric stimulation. Not content with the enlargement, 200 million volts of electricity stimulated every cell in his body, further enhancing his physical strength and speed. "Get out of the way." The millstone-sized cat paw, crackling with electricity, slammed down on the charging Jello. Fist and claw collided, but George's strength ultimately prevailed, sending Jello flying. "Go." At the same time, he commanded blades to shred the blasted Jello. Facing a level 10 wizard, one cannot hold back. Only by going all out can one have a chance of victory. Open, Gate of Aquarius. Aquarius, below, on the vast ocean, Lucy also plunged her golden celestial key into the sea. A blue magic circle rose, and the mermaid Aquarius, veins bulging, roared angrily, holding a magic bottle. "You brats, interrupting my date again. Die, all of you." A terrifying burst of magic power, no less than that of an average S-class mage, erupted. The water in the magic bottle, carrying a massive amount of seawater, formed a tsunami that swept towards the falling Jello. Huh? But the terrifying tsunami not only swept away Jello but also engulfed a large ship carrying Natsu, Grey, Juvia, and Lucy. It was truly an indiscriminate, wide-range attack. Giant armor. Spear of exorcism. Urza, having dodged the attack, donned her strongest giant armor and hurled her spear, meant to ward off all evil, towards Jello, who was being swept away by the seawater. Interesting. I'll play with you then. Facing a multi-pronged attack that would be fatal to most S-rank mages, Jello showed no sign of panic. He simply crossed his arms, and a black magic circle rose up. Fall into the endless darkness, dark paradise. A black hole, seemingly capable of swallowing everything, instantly appeared, engulfing countless sharp blades, seawater, and giant spears before exploding with a deafening roar. The powerful shockwave blasted George, Urza, Aquarius, Lucy, and many others away. Ice shape, great platform. A white magic circle lit up in the seawater, and a massive ice platform instantly spread across the surface, catching everyone who had been thrown back. It was Grey, now recovered, who had used ice magic. Damn, that's strong. George, now back to normal size, landed on the ice and couldn't help but curse. So many S-rank mages ganging up on him, and he'd managed to break through with a single spell, even more terrifying than Joseph last time. Let me tell you a secret that will leave you in despair. That Guildmaster Jose, whom your entire guild struggled to defeat, is ranked lower than one of my thought entities among the 10 wizard saints. Oh, I forgot to tell you, the reason the council activated the magic spirit power was because I created a thought entity named Zekylene. You should have heard of that name, Zekylene. George's pupils contracted upon hearing this. Of course, he knew the name, one of the renowned 10 wizard saints, the youngest of the 10, and a member of the council, though no photos of him had ever surfaced. He never imagined it was merely a thought entity of Jello. A thought entity is an extremely profound form of magic, impossible for anyone below the top S rank to learn. It's very difficult, but also incredibly useful. It allows one to create a real, existing clone, possessing up to half the original's power, and can be recalled at any time regardless of distance. A thought entity with only half the power was already ranked above Jose. One can only imagine how terrifying Jello's full power must be. Don't forget, a person's strength can improve. While Jello was caught up in the villain's tendency to talk too much, George telepathically notified Natsu to come over and began pouring fiend fire into his mouth. After the battle with Phantom Lord, everyone's strength had increased, especially Natsu. Due to the extreme feeding of fiend fire, he seemed to have unlocked some special power, greatly enhancing his body's ability to withstand fiend fire. Oh, improvement? Then I'll show you what a difference is. Standing on the floating celestial magic circle, Jello laughed wildly, his magical power surging, distorting the surrounding air. True celestial magic, starfall, a massive magic circle rose above his head, and a huge meteorite, laden with endless flames, crashed down upon George and the others below. A meteorite falling from the sky could easily reduce a city to ashes in a single blow. Chapter 209 The Thunder Giant Absorbs Thunderstorms. It really is celestial magic. George's lips twitched as he looked at the massive meteorite falling from the sky. Everyone, come over here. With a meteorite that big, even their combined defense probably couldn't stop it. Since they couldn't stop it, they had to dodge it. Hearing George's telepathic message, everyone, including Lucy and the others, gathered around him. Natsu, use blazing flame, left hand flame and right hand flame, combine the two flames into one. Fire Dragon's blazing flame. He fused his own flame with the absorbed fiery flame, and the enormous blazing flame shot upwards to meet the meteorite head-on. Taking advantage of this opportunity, George pointed at the ice below. Mirror world, the hard ice surface immediately rippled, and everyone simultaneously fell into mirror world, the opposite of reality. What's going on? Seeing the meteorite shatter the blazing flame and continue hurtling towards them, seemingly unaffected by the massive tsunami, Lucy and the others looked completely bewildered. This is my mirror magic. It allows me to temporarily hide in another mirror world, unaffected by the outside world, George explained. Hugh, on the other end, said, it's special magic, very similar to mine. Hugh's magic creates a space within a playing card, then collects enemies within that space. The playing card space is similar to this mirror world, only smaller. Gerald is proficient in all kinds of magic and is very sensitive to space. He'll discover this place soon. Simon, looking at the still simmering tsunami outside, said, let's leave first. We're no match for Jello. No, if Jello resurrects Zareth, it will be a catastrophe for the entire world. Urza looked at George. George, you send them away first. I'll stay and try to ambush Jello to see if we can kill him. I'm not leaving. Me neither. If Lord Grey doesn't leave, I won't leave either. Natsu and Grey clearly didn't want Urza to risk her life alone and decided to stay and continue fighting Jello to the end. George thought for a moment and rearranged the battle plan. That level of magic just now definitely drained a lot of his magic power. I have a very powerful spell that might be able to defeat him, but it will take time to prepare. He didn't want to give up such a large piece of magic crystal. How long will it take? Urza asked. At least 7 minutes, George calculated. His ultimate move was naturally that very time-consuming ancient spell. With a wand of this world, the lightning storm he unleashed was much stronger than the one in Marvel Asgard. Of course, this lightning storm spell alone probably wouldn't be enough to defeat Jello, so he had a new idea. If it succeeded, then the chances of victory would be high. If it failed, he wouldn't covet the magic crystal anymore and would operate with everyone to escape. Their lives were more important. Don't worry, we will definitely buy you enough time. Urza changed back into her breast wrap, holding 2 magic swords, determined that even if she died, she would delay for 7 minutes. To the island, with a magic crystal there, we can make him hesitate to act. George led everyone quickly towards the island in the mirror world. Fighting on its small island, Jello couldn't unleash a spell of the level of Starfall, otherwise it would destroy the magic crystal as well. Outside, standing on the celestial magic circle, Jello frowned as he watched the magical aura of everyone vanish after the tsunami subsided. They shouldn't all be dead. His celestial magic was indeed powerful. He could understand purifying ordinary minions into nothingness. But someone like Urza, an S-rank guild with the incredibly strong defensive armor, would at most be severely injured and near death. As a member of the guild council, he had all the intelligence from the recent fairy tale guild war and knew the strength of those below. They couldn't have been killed so easily. Looks like they were hiding. Let me see where you're hiding. 2 magic circles lit up in his eyes as Jello began to examine the surrounding space. His magic mentor was named Brian, who had served as the director of the Magical Development Bureau in his early years and was proficient in all kinds of magic. He was also a natural-born magic prodigy, learning most spells almost instantly. So, besides the powerful celestial magic, he also learned many other spells with various auxiliary functions. This kind of detection magic was one of them. Found it, so it entered another space to hide. In less than 2 minutes, Jello had already found the spatial flaw in the mirror world's magic. He raised his hand and cast a spatial spell, forcibly opening the spatial point connecting to the mirror world, and plunged in. In the mirror world, he quickly sensed Urza and the others' presence and flew towards the island. This guy actually got in. On the island, sensing Jello's presence entering the mirror world, George led everyone back to the real world through the mirror of the magic crystal. Simon had just said that Jello could enter the mirror world, and he wasn't particularly surprised. Although it was magic from different worlds, the essence of magic was similar. Ikaruga could use a sword to cut through space to attack Urza, who was locked in the card space, and Urza could also cut through space to escape the card seal, indicating that in this world, spatial magic was not unbreakable. It wasn't surprising that Jello, who was so powerful and proficient in multiple spells, could see through the mirror world and break in. Magic like mirror space is best suited for dealing with reckless mages like Natsu. It's easily countered by mages who enjoy researching various spells. Where do you think you're going to run now? Not long after George led everyone away from the mirror world, Jello returned to reality. Jello, let me finish you off. Urza, wielding 2 magic swords, charged into fight. Natsu, Gray, Juvia, Lucy, and Simon, Hugh, Willie, and Miliana, who had recovered some strength, joined the fray. George silently retreated, continuing to chant a long incantation of ancient magic. Jello's strength was still formidable. Even without using large-scale magic, he easily overwhelmed everyone. Fortunately, Urza and the others were incredibly resilient, gritting their teeth and persevering. Thunderstorm. Thunder Giant, seeing that everyone was about to give up, George finally finished his incantation. The instant he finished chanting, he activated his psychic power, condensing the iron sand and rocks from the island into a towering Thunder Giant. That's right, he just wanted to try and see if he could get the Thunder Giant to absorb the lightning from the thunderstorm magic and become even stronger. I'll finish dealing with things at home today, and start updating like crazy tomorrow. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210 Shattering the Darkness with Thunder. I will create a kingdom of freedom. Zareth whispered to me in pain and fear, I am the chosen one, destined to create a kingdom of freedom with Zareth. Why can't you understand? Before my great ideal, all sacrifices are worthwhile. Jello unleashed his magical power frantically, drawing magic circles, starlight washing over the land like missiles, turning Urza and the others' resistance into nothingness. Urza's magic sword shattered, Natsu and Gray were covered in wounds, even standing was a problem. Lucy's Aquaria was also sent back to the celestial spirit world. Juvia was somewhat better because she could transform into water, but Simon and the others were all seriously injured and lay on the ground. Jello, your so-called ideal will never be realized, because we still have George. Looking at Jello's distorted face in the air, Urza gritted her teeth and stood up, roaring. At this moment, 7 minutes had passed, and she could see the lightning-filled clouds in the sky and the Thunder Giant gradually taking shape behind Jello. Boom! Urza's words had barely faded when countless bolts of lightning, controlled by George's wand, struck towards Jello in midair. Jello waved his hand, drawing a magic circle and condensing starlight into a shield to protect himself. He turned with some surprise to look at George, who stood atop the Thunder Giant. I thought Urza would be the most difficult to deal with, but it turns out to be you cat. Urza and her companions were stronger than the intelligence indicated, but it was still within his expectations. The only one exceeding his expectations was this cat named George. Initially, the intelligence suggested he possessed a healing spell similar to Arc of Time, and later it seemed he had acquired some fire and offensive magic, but his strength was at most at the average S-rank level. Therefore, he hadn't paid much attention to George's earlier stealth away from the battlefield. He figured that once Urza and her group were dealt with, a mere cat wouldn't pose much of a threat. But now it seemed this cat's strength was far beyond that of an average S rank. The lightning bolts bombarding him were now comparable in power to the magic of an average S rank lightning mage. The key wasn't a one-time attack, but a continuous barrage. You haven't considered many things. Seeing Gerald block the lightning strike, George controlled the 30-meter-tall thunder giant, raising its right hand. Go! Intense electricity, carrying iron, sand and rock, unleashed an enlarged version of the electromagnetic cannon. It looks stronger than the previous one, but it's far from enough to defeat me. Gerald maintained his starlight magic defense against the lightning strike with his left hand, while his right hand unfurled a golden magic circle. Celestial magic, 6-star link, 6 golden celestial bodies appeared within the magic circle, firing in rapid succession at the enlarged electromagnetic cannon. After a deafening explosion, the celestial bodies and the electromagnetic cannon vanished simultaneously. Still not enough. Then let's go. Seeing that the thunder giant's electromagnetic cannon couldn't harm Gerald, George knew he had to use his last resort. A fusion of ancient thunderstorm magic and lightning superpowers, his newly created ultimate version of the electromagnetic cannon. He closed his eyes, entering the ancient magical state of sensing the heavens and earth once more. Then, he waved his wand, drawing all the lightning bolts that were originally hurtling towards Jello from the sky to his head and channeling them into the thunder giant's body. With the infusion of countless bolts, the thunder giant's body began to expand rapidly. More and more sand, rocks, and iron filings were attracted by the lightning, and even seawater from outside the island was sucked into its body. In just a few seconds, the thunder giant he, a level 4 Esper, had created, only 30 meters tall, surpassed Misaka Mikado's level 5 Esper, which was 100 meters tall. It finally stopped expanding at 200 meters. It seems this is the limit. 200 meters was the limit he could currently control with his level 4 Esper combined with magic. If he continued to inject lightning, he would no longer be able to control the immense electrical current within the thunder giant. To break through, his Esper power would have to rise from level 4 to level 5. What kind of magic is this? Even the usually composed Jello was startled by the thunder giant, which was twice the size of the magic crystal. He knew the Fairy Tales Guild Master, Makarov, was proficient in giant magic. This cat had used the same giant magic to enlarge its size before, but among the giant magic he knew, there was no such type of giant. Is this the ultimate move George was talking about? Lucy and the others barely managed to sit up, staring dumbfounded at the 200-meter-tall lightning giant. Even Laxus couldn't do this, Gray muttered. Who is the guild's strongest lightning mage? Of course, it was the guild master's grandson, the S-class mage Laxus, who had once knocked Natsu unconscious with a single blow. But now, he felt that the title of the guild's strongest lightning mage should be awarded to George. George, beat him up for us. Let him know how powerful we fairy tale mages are. Let him understand that freedom gained by taking someone else's freedom is not true freedom. Natsu, with his amazing recovery ability, opened his mouth and spat a ball of fire into the air, shouting excitedly. Only the unwavering will to change the world can propel history forward. Since things have come to this, then you will all die? Jello's eyes bloodshot as he rapidly drew a massive black magic circle in the air. It's Purgatory Shatter. Jello, are you trying to destroy the magic crystal tower as well? Urza was shocked to see the magic circle Jello unleashed. Purgatory Shatter was a forbidden magic that combined the 4 elements of wind, water, fire, and earth to create arc energy. The most powerful spell in the mobile fortress where they captured the Phantom Lord wasn't the magic crystal cannon, but the forbidden magic Purgatory Shatter, created by the 4 elementalists channeling their power and guided by Joseph. However, Arya, representing wind, had been beheaded by George beforehand, preventing her from using it. Now, Jello had single-handedly unleashed this forbidden magic, demonstrating that his strength far surpassed Joseph's. Destroy it if you want, I'll rebuild it in 5 years. Gerald poured all his power into the black magic circle. Facing the 200-meter-tall thunder giant, he felt immense pressure after expending a considerable amount of magic power. At this moment, he couldn't care less about the magic crystal being affected. Forbidden magic, Purgatory Shatter. An exceptionally thick black energy erupted from the magic circle, rushing straight towards George. Shatter the darkness with lightning, ultimate railgun. Facing Gerald's forbidden magic, George dared not be careless. He concentrated all the electricity within the thunder giant's body into his right hand and unleashed the ultimate version of the railgun. Chapter 211 The real culprit behind the scenes, Altair. The lightning that illuminated the heavens and earth collided with the all-consuming darkness, and the powerful explosion instantly spread in all directions, shattering the magic crystal tower into several pieces. The entire island gradually dissipated in the collision of darkness and lightning. Fortunately, George had already used telepathy to inform Urza and the others of their countermeasures before the attack. Before the two sides' magic collided, Hugh activated a playing card magic in advance, collecting everyone's injuries into playing cards. Then, Juvia, who was in the best condition, took Hugh and sank directly into the sea to avoid the aftershocks of the magical collision. Luckily, I'm tough enough, otherwise I really wouldn't have been able to withstand it. As the lightning and darkness receded, George used his wand to cast a healing spell on himself. If he hadn't strengthened his body with giant magic at the crucial moment, he probably wouldn't have been just injured. You little brat, huh? You're not so arrogant now, are you? Looking down, the island, which was originally larger than a town, had now shrunk to the size of a football field due to the aftershocks of the collision. Gerald lay charred black on the island, unconscious from his severe injuries. The forbidden magic, Purgatory Shatter, Gerald had used was nearly as powerful as his ultimate version of the electromagnetic cannon, but Gerald was much tougher and, thanks to timely treatment, he was mostly unharmed. My magic crystals, looking at the shattered magic crystals scattered on the ground, less than 1% of their original value, George felt immense pain. He hadn't had time to protect them in the previous situation, resulting in the destruction of most of them from the aftershocks. Better than nothing, George consoled himself, collecting the remaining magic crystals into his box and storing them in his special storage. These crystals should last him 2 years, he could figure out other ways to use them later. George. Just as George finished collecting the magic crystals, Urza and the others surfaced from the sea. Seeing George standing unharmed on the small island, no bigger than a football field, while Gerald lay unconscious with severe injuries, they all breathed a sigh of relief. Swimming to the island, Urza drew a new magic sword and pointed it at Jello through gritted teeth. Today, I will finish you off, fulfilling the destiny of these past 8 years. Originally, she came to this island hoping to save Jello and guide him back to the right path. After all, Jello had been so gentle and kind, captured by those dark mages while protecting them, and turned into what he is now. But after hearing Jello's words, she understood he was beyond redemption. Only by ending Jello completely could she prevent him from causing even greater destruction in the future. So even if she felt reluctant, she absolutely could not hesitate. Wait, don't rush, George stopped Urza. Through Urza's narration and Jello's words, he felt there was something strange about this whole affair. According to Urza, Jello was originally very gentle, kind, and righteous. His personality suddenly changed after being captured by the Black Mages. He banished her and began to carry on the wishes of those Black Mages, dedicating himself to the task of resurrecting Zareth. Jello said it was because he heard Zareth's whispers, which told him what true freedom was. Analyzing this from a normal psychological development perspective, this is completely impossible. A change in personality and beliefs always takes time, at least several months, and even, according to Urza's description, for someone as strong as Jello, it would take years. If one had to consider a possibility, it would be like the Imperious Curse he cast, using mental magic to influence a person's mind, which could cause such a rapid personality change. Therefore, Urza suspects that Jello was likely subjected to mental magic after being captured by the Black Mages, and that this control was prolonged. Otherwise, given Jello's demonstrated strength, he should have been able to recover quickly on his own if he hadn't been constantly affected. Lichectine. George placed his cat paw on Geralt's head, activating both telepathy and Lichectine simultaneously. Normally, activating Lichectine requires the target to be conscious and to look into their eyes, allowing the user to peer into their mind and read fragments of their memories. George, however, didn't need to go through that trouble. He directly used his telepathic abilities to invade Geralt's brain and then applied the enhanced Lichectine effect. There really is one. Immediately after invading Geralt's brain, he detected a hidden spiritual energy residing within it. Get down here, his telepathic abilities erupted, forcibly pulling the spiritual energy from Geralt's mind, restoring it to its original form within Geralt's consciousness. It's you. Upon seeing the spiritual entity's appearance, George's face immediately showed surprise. He recognized this person, or more accurately, had met them once before. It was Altair, the council leader he had encountered when he went to Clover to repair the town. "I never expected the plan to fail in the end, thanks to you, you cat." Altair looked at George, who appeared in Jello's mind like a giant beast, and knew that the mental power she had left in Jello's brain was no match for George. So, after revealing herself, she left a sentence and then disappeared. He was indeed controlled by a female mage from the council named Altair. George withdrew his hand and told everyone about Jello's situation. Everyone was shocked by this truth. Urza and Simon's eyes, which had looked at Jello with disappointment and hatred, turned into pity. The gentle and kind Jello they once knew had never disappeared from their hearts. Knowing that Jello had been controlled to do these things, they naturally no longer resented him. As for Natsu and Lucy, they were all kind-hearted people. Since no comrades had died in this battle, they didn't care too much. Healed to full health, Jello's injuries were not light. To prevent him from dying, George cast basic healing magic on him. After learning the truth, he had some ideas in mind. Since his goal was to become the guild master of Fairy Tail in the future, strengthening the guild was essential. The stronger the guild, the more benefits he could gain in this world. If Fairy Tail became the most powerful guild in the world one day, he wouldn't even need to leave the guild. The guild's mages, carrying out missions around the world, could bring him a lot of resources and magic he wanted. Therefore, he felt that if Jello could return to normal and bring him and Simon into the guild, it might be a good option. Chapter 212 Immortality Achieved. Jello's strength is undeniable. Without the fusion of Thunder Giant and ancient magic, he would be no match for Jello. And without Urza and the others buying him time, he wouldn't have been able to deliver the final blow. Therefore, in terms of true strength, Jello is far superior. Even Guildmaster Makarov, without using fairy law, might not be able to defeat Jello. At his normal strength, Makarov is only slightly stronger than Joseph, whose power is less than half that of Jello's thought form. Even if Makarov used fairy law, whether he could defeat Jello is uncertain, as he doesn't truly understand its full power. Makarov was interrupted by Aria's sneak attack halfway through his activation. By recruiting Jello into Fairy Tail now has 2 genuine wizards of 10. Furthermore, Simon and the others are quite strong. While not yet S-class mages, they are top-tier mages below S-class. With a few more years of training, it's possible to advance to S rank. Of course, this refers to S rank in ordinary mage guilds. The requirements for S rank in Fairy Tail are much higher. Most importantly, he was very interested in Jello's celestial magic. His injuries have stabilized. Let's go back to the guild. Taking out a box and putting everyone inside, George used apparition to bring them all back to the guild. Mira Jane, who was anxiously waiting inside the guild, immediately asked nervously upon seeing George, "How are you?" Urza, Natsu, Gray, Lucy, and Happy, "Don't worry, they're all fine, just a little injured and exhausted. They'll be fine after a few days of rest." George took out a box from his transformation space and released Urza and the others. Mira Jane patted her chest and breathed a huge sigh of relief. "I just heard from Counselor Yajima that the magic spirit cannon has been fired and the council has been destroyed. I was so scared." "Thank goodness you're all alright." The council was destroyed. George was stunned. Mira Jane explained, "It seems to be the work of a female mage named Altair. The council has temporarily disbanded and is preparing for reorganization." Altair again. "This girl seems quite formidable." George flicked his cat whiskers, inwardly sighing. Without a doubt, Altair is also a mage from a dark guild. It's just unknown which guild she belongs to. The fact that dark guilds remain so active despite the council's and other legitimate guilds' attacks suggests their strength is not to be underestimated. There must be many mages among them who can rival the 10 wizard saints. Good. Since the council needs to reorganize, there's no time to deal with Jello's matter. This allows Makarov to gather information about the Tower of Paradise incident and leverage his connections to exonerate Jello. In a way, Jello is also a victim in this whole affair, a puppet controlled from childhood. The real mastermind is Altair. But to convince the council of this information and get Jello off the hook, some preparations need to be made beforehand. The guild now possesses strength, wealth, and influence, and has even helped the Magic Council prevent Zeraph's resurrection. With a Magic Council leaderless after its disbandment and reorganization, as long as Makarov keeps running around, he can at least help repair the Magic Council. There shouldn't be any major problems. In the evening, Jello awoke, his mind nearly collapsing due to his actions over the past 8 years. Fortunately, Urza and Simon comforted him, eventually calming him down. The next day, Makarov finally returned to Fairy Tale with the renovated moving castle. After learning the details of the Tower of Paradise incident, he followed George's advice, recruiting Jelil and his companions into Fairy Tale, and began searching for mages who had left Fairy Tale to help resolve Jelil's situation. Many of the mages who left Fairy Tale now hold considerable positions. For example, Warlord Shinken, one of the founders of the Fairy Tale Guild, is currently ranked 4th among the 10 wizard saints, holding an extraordinary position in the kingdom. There was also Counselor Ajima, the guild master of the Four-Headed Hound Guild and the Blue Pegasus Guild, which were second only to Fairy Tale, both former Fairy Tale mages. After all the commotion, the Magic Council finally believed Jelil's innocence, pardoned his crimes, and instead issued a nationwide warrant for the arrest of the female mage Jeltir. Meanwhile, with the completion of the moving castle renovation, the Fairy Tale Guild underwent a major transformation. The original 2-story Fairy Tale Guild was demolished, and the moving castle was grafted onto it, with a staircase leading to the former underground library. There were also staircases descending from all 4 sides of the castle. The Fairy Tale Guild is now the tallest, most prominent, and most luxurious building in Magnolia City. It's equipped with magic crystal cannons and a super magic circle capable of concentrating light magic attacks. Even the guild's male and female dormitories were moved from the city to the guild, as the castle is so large and has many rooms for the mages. However, rent still needs to be paid, but it's much cheaper than the original dormitory rent. Even Lucy, who was most particular about her quality of life, gave up her large rented house and moved into the guild's castle. George was no exception, except he made some modifications to his room, expanding it considerably with a seamless stretch charm to facilitate his magical experiments. Morgana's ring. Inscribing Morgana's ring on the floor, George took out a magic crystal and began meditating to absorb its magic power. Because of his panda clone's diligent daily meditation, coupled with the tenfold mage enhancement from the magic crystal, his mage level had reached 499. One more level and he could break through to 500. At 500, his main body and all his clones would achieve immortality, no longer worrying about lifespan. Therefore, he hadn't studied magic for the past few days, instead focusing entirely on absorbing the magic crystal and meditating to break through. No matter how powerful one was, without immortality, it was all meaningless. Only with enough time could one explore the true essence of magic and become a truly powerful being. Therefore, breaking through to 500 was extremely important to him. It's here, as the magic crystal in his hand gradually disappeared, George felt the magic power within his body suddenly explode, spreading to every corner and every cell. Nourished by the magic power, his cells seemed to undergo a fundamental change, and he instantly felt different. When all the magic power returned and gathered together again, George instinctively knew that his body would no longer be corroded by time. He had broken through to level 500. Chapter 213 George, the most terrifying wizard in Nocturne Alley. In the Harry Potter world, a few days before the start of the school year, George returned to his house in Nocturne Lane in London from Paris, France. Hermione had gone back 2 weeks earlier. Her father's dentist clinic couldn't be closed all the time. Amy returned to London with George. She was going to take up the post of Deputy Director of the Department of International Magical Cooperation at the Ministry of Magic. Unfortunately, Amy wasn't skilled in silent or wandless spellcasting, so she would have to learn it from Snape after school started. Amy's abilities were good, among the best of the Aurors, but she was still far behind the professors at Hogwarts. Wizards like Snape, Flitwick, and McGonagall were few and far between in the entire wizarding world, not to mention Dumbledore, who is currently the strongest wizard in the entire wizarding world. Even Voldemort had to step aside. This was why, despite her current abilities, she still needed to attend Hogwarts. There was indeed still much to learn. Putting aside his magic in other worlds, his level of magic within this world's magical system isn't actually that impressive. He's only learned a lot of magic through multiple brains, but in reality, he's about on par with a typical excellent 7th-year wizard. His understanding of many magical principles isn't thorough enough. At least he can't create new spells like Snape. There are still many things he needs to learn, such as the Faithful Charm, the Time Reversal Charm, various weather charms and powerful curses, portkeys, magical cars, flunets, and so on. These are all very useful in different worlds. Of course, this doesn't mean he's weak. In terms of pure combat power, Given his current situation, with the magic from various worlds combined with his superpowers, he wouldn't be afraid of Voldemort resurrecting and facing him head-on. Even against Dumbledore, it's hard to say who would win in a real fight. Sirius Black, that guy's pretty good too, George remarked after breakfast on the last day before school started, looking at the Daily Prophet's report on Sirius Black's escape. Sirius Black has been out of prison for some time now. The Ministry of Magic, in an effort to salvage its reputation, has even reassigned all its administrative staff, yet they still haven't found him. The main reason is that the Ministry of Magic doesn't know Sirius possesses animagus powers, allowing him to transform into animals to evade pursuers. Speaking of animagus, George had already found the procedures for animagus transformation in the library, but he hadn't practiced it. Firstly, it was too time-consuming, taking several months at best, and at the fastest, a month. Secondly, he considered that transforming into an ordinary animal was no longer useful to him, and he was considering whether there was a future opportunity to become a magical creature. Normally, animagus cannot become magical creatures, only ordinary animals. However, he considered that if he later obtained the dragon crystal in his fairy tale clone, gaining the physique of a dragon slayer, then perhaps during the animagus transformation, he would have a chance to become a dragon. And not the weak dragon of the Harry Potter world, but a true magical dragon of the fairy tale world. George, are you home? Just as George was sitting in the yard drinking tea and reading the Daily Prophet, he suddenly heard two familiar voices coming from outside the shop. Getting up and going to the door, he saw none other than Hermione, Ginny, Harry, Ron, and the Weasley twins. What are you all doing here? He hadn't expected Hermione and the others to come to Nocturne Alley to find him. Regular wizards generally didn't come here, and many young wizards had been warned against it. We're looking for you to go buy new textbooks for school, Hermione and Ginny said simultaneously. It turned out that the Wheeleyes and Grangers had all come to Diagon Alley that morning. They planned to buy all their school supplies that day, stay at the Leaky Cauldron that night, and head to the station early the next morning to avoid a rush. Harry, having inflated Aunt Maggie with the inflation charm, was also staying at the Leaky Cauldron. The group had gathered together and started talking about George. Hearing that George was staying in Nocturne Alley, they had some ideas. The Weasley brothers had always been extremely interested in Nocturne Alley. Hermione and Ginny harbored a special fondness for George. Harry had visited Nocturne Alley once last year, but hadn't had a chance to really see it properly in his haste, and Ron was simply curious. So, the group quickly decided to go to Diagon Alley to buy school supplies, keeping it a secret from their parents, but actually sneaking off to Nocturne Alley. George, upon hearing this, could only think, no wonder they're all Gryffindors, they're really brave. Alright, let's go then. I still have a few textbooks I haven't had time to buy this year. George closed the door and headed straight for Diagon Alley with the others. He had already finished reading his second-year textbooks, but some of this year's textbooks were different from last year's, such as the Magical Creatures textbook, the Monster Book of Monsters. George, I really admire you, managing to live here so safely. On the way back to Diagon Alley, Ron said to George, still shaken. Nocturne Alley wasn't just filled with terrifyingly decorated shops, the wizards there also seemed quite abnormal. If they hadn't all drawn their wands, ready to retaliate at any moment, they would have worried about being captured and eaten by the dark wizards here. Huh? Why are they suddenly like this? Ron had just finished speaking when he realized that the situation outside was completely different from when they came in. When they came in, even though they had all drawn their wands to threaten them, those terrifying-looking wizards looked like big bad wolves seeing little white rabbits, their eyes full of greed. But now, before they even took out their wands, they saw those wizards just glance at them and quickly turn and run away, seemingly afraid of getting involved with this place in the slightest. The greed in their eyes had completely turned into fear. Some shops along the street even closed their doors. Oh, it's nothing, most of the wizards here are not mentally sound, maybe they've lost their minds. George casually changed the subject. This situation was naturally largely due to him. He hadn't been idle during the few days he had been back in Nocturne Alley. To prevent a repeat of the shop robberies that occurred while he was away at school, he personally visited each shop owner, engaging in very friendly negotiations. He didn't even spare the dark wizards who frequented the street. After being electrocuted several times, these dark wizards now tremble at the mere sight of him. The once frail little slave adopted by the old dark wizard had now become the most terrifying wizard in Nocturne Alley. Chapter 214. Why is he so outstanding? The others didn't doubt George's statement much. In their eyes, dark wizards were a bunch of brain-dead individuals, and it was understandable that they would do anything insane. Only Hermione looked at George thoughtfully, because she had witnessed George's magical abilities firsthand in Paris. "George, I heard you received a Medal of Honor from the French Ministry of Magic," Ginny asked, her eyes sparkling, on the way out of Nocturne Alley. The others also gathered around with interest. They had seen the report in the Daily Prophet, and Hermione had mentioned it before they came that morning. They were eager to hear how George had defeated the infamous, internationally wanted Dark Wizard. Luck, mainly thanks to the Aurors over there. I only helped with a tiny bit," George said modestly, waving his hand. "I heard from Hermione that you single-handedly dealt with several Dark Wizards and even saved her." The others clearly didn't believe George had only helped with a small matter and began to press him for details. George, feeling helpless, could only give a rough account of the battle, including when to use which spell, how to dodge, and how to counterattack. Harry and the others listened, somewhat bewildered. Their understanding of magical duels was still limited to back-and-forth exchanges. They lacked practical experience. The group chatted and walked, quickly leaving the dark Nocturne Alley and returning to the bustling Diagon Alley. "Let's go buy some books." Books were something everyone needed, unlike cauldrons, which didn't need to be replaced once purchased in the first year. Arriving at Flourish and Blotts, they were surprised to find several bookshelves missing, replaced by a large iron cage containing over 100 strange magical books. These books seemed to be alive, tearing and thrashing within the cage, which looked quite amusing. "It's the textbook for protecting magical creatures, the Monster Book of Monsters," Ron said, glancing at the book list. Protecting magical creatures was a third-year course. George, being a second year, didn't need to buy it, but he had always been interested in magical creatures and planned to buy a copy for later reading. For him now, understanding magical creatures is no longer about making money, but more about understanding the magic they are born with. The principles of magic are all interconnected. Many magical inventions in the wizarding world are inseparable from magical creatures, and many new spells are created by drawing inspiration from the magic of magical creatures. Therefore, studying magical creatures is very beneficial for learning and innovating magic. For example, if he learns the Zawoo's magic that ignores spatial blockades, he won't have to worry about being blocked by other space-based mages in the future, thus preventing him from apparating. "What? You want 4 copies of the Book of Monsters?" The shopkeeper's face fell when he heard George and his companion's words. He felt like he was about to shatter. "I'm never stocking these again, never again. It's such a mess. We bought 200 copies of the Book of Invisibility, spent a fortune, and then we never even found a trace of them. I thought it couldn't get any worse. If this happens again, I'm not stocking these books at all." Muttering to himself, he put on thick gloves, grabbed a large stick covered in bite marks, and gritted his teeth as he walked towards the large iron cage. Oh. Damn it, I should burn you all with a Dark Wizard's Fiend Fire spell." The poor shopkeeper had just reached the stick into the cage, and before he could even scare them away, a monster book bit him and pulled him away. His other glove was also tightly gripped by several monster books, and he couldn't break free. "I'll do it myself." George shook his head and walked to the iron cage. What were these wizards who designed these magic books thinking? Weren't they afraid that these monster books would accidentally bite the young wizards? But after thinking about it carefully, he felt it was understandable. After all, young wizards were usually quite resilient. Even if they lost an arm or a leg, they could reattach it. Being bitten by a monster book didn't seem like a big deal. "Careful, these books are fierce." The shop assistant's gloves were completely torn apart, and he sat down on the ground with a thud. When he saw George reach into the cage, he quickly warned him, but before he could finish speaking, George swiftly grabbed a monster book and quickly tied it up with a rope. Then came the second, the third, and the fourth. The whole process was incredibly smooth, as if the monster books offered no resistance at all. The shop assistant and Harry and the others were dumbfounded. Actually, it was quite normal. With George's current physical strength, it was impossible for those monster books to bite him, and once he grabbed them, they couldn't resist the immense strength in his hands. "George, do me a favor. All your books are 20% off today." Seeing that George and the others were about to leave after buying their books, the shop assistant grabbed George's arm, his eyes full of pitiful eyes. He didn't want to get bitten by the monster books again. It wasn't serious, but it really hurt. He remembered yesterday when he accidentally got bitten by one while getting the book. The pain almost killed him. They're all old friends, of course, no problem. George didn't refuse the clerk's request, it was just a matter of course for him. He went back to the cage, and to be more efficient, he didn't reach inside but simply lifted the cage and went in. Upon seeing someone enter, all the monster books surged forward. At that moment, George's hands flashed like after images, as if he had instantly transformed into a 1,000-armed Guanyin, taking down the monster books one by one, tying them with rope, and piling them aside. In just 30 seconds, over 100 monster books had been subdued. "Why is he always so excellent?" Ron couldn't help but exclaim in amazement. In his eyes, George had almost no flaws, he excelled in every aspect. "I wish I were that excellent," Harry said, a hint of envy in his eyes. Despite being the boy who survived the ordeal and the renowned Harry Potter, he actually felt that aside from being good at Quidditch, he was just average in every other aspect. Because he works so hard. "If you guys spent the time you usually spend playing on studying, you wouldn't be copying my summer homework?" Hermione couldn't help but roll her eyes. Those two only knew how to play all day, they didn't spend even a tenth of the time studying as much as George. When she was in Paris, she often visited George and knew that even during summer vacation in Paris, he never slacked off on his studies. He spent almost every 24 hours a day, except for sleeping, eating, and going to the bathroom, studying and practicing magic. This was something she truly admired. Talented people aren't scary, what's truly terrifying is someone who is talented and works far more hard than you. Because you'll never catch up to them. Chapter 215 Alchemist Master Arthur. After leaving Flourish and Blots with thanks from the clerks, George and his friends continued browsing in Diagon Alley. After buying some magic study tools, Hermione expressed her desire to buy a pet. For the past 2 years, she had spent all her money on books, and she had become envious of everyone else who had pets, so she wanted to get one this year. Owls were her first choice, so she wouldn't have to go to the owl post office to write letters. "Looks like some things are destined to happen," George muttered to himself as he watched Hermione emerge carrying a large ginger cat whose face looked like it had been smashed against a wall. After buying their pets, it was already noon, so they all went to the Leaky Cauldron for lunch. It was there that he first met Arthur Weasley, the alchemy expert who liked to combine magic with Muggle technology, Ron's father. Arthur Weasley was sitting at the bar reading the Daily Prophet, and the newspaper clearly showed the gaunt, grotesque Sirius Black howling. "You're back. And who is this?" Arthur put down his newspaper and asked, seeing the unfamiliar George. Ginny quickly stepped forward to introduce him. "Dad, this is George, the one I told you about before." "Oh, George, I know him. The youngest national Quidditch player and the youngest recipient of the Badge of Valor. Ginny talks about you all the time, saying you're the best first-year wizard." Arthur Weasley looked at George with admiration in his eyes. This was his first time meeting George, but he knew it was George's persuasion that gave Ginny the courage to tell the truth about Voldemort's journal. "Hello, Mr. Weasley. I've heard you're a master of alchemy. I've been studying alchemy recently, and I hope to have the opportunity to ask you some questions." In alchemy, Arthur was definitely a top-notch figure. The magical car he modified was proof of that. The various prank magical items invented and made by the Weasley brothers all utilized a lot of alchemical knowledge, likely stemming from some guidance from their father, Arthur. So, if he wanted to learn alchemy, Arthur Weasley was definitely a good choice. "Master, no, it's just a hobby. But if you're interested, we can discuss it. I've been thinking lately, if we added a seamless stretch charm to a Muggle's refrigerator, would we be able to live like it's winter in the hot summer?" Arthur became quite talkative once he started discussing his hobby. George, seeing this as a rare opportunity, also shared some questions he'd encountered while self-studying alchemy. They talked for a while, and soon it was evening. "If only I had spent some time visiting Ron's family this summer," George thought regretfully as they ate at the Leaky Cauldron that evening. Arthur's alchemical skills were undeniable. In just half a day, he felt he had made significant progress. Unlike the difficult-to-understand alchemical terminology in books, Arthur could always explain the complexities of alchemy in the simplest and most understandable way. If Hogwarts offered alchemy classes, he thought Arthur would be absolutely qualified to be a professor. "Looks like next summer vacation is the only option, but I can still chat with the Weasley brothers more often." The Weasley brothers' alchemy skills are mostly focused on creating prank-related magical gadgets, but those things, if used well, can also be quite effective offensive weapons. For example, the fat tongue candy, which makes your tongue grow huge, rendering you unable to speak and causing you great pain. The doorknob biting candy, which can bite off your fingers if you reach for a doorknob. The constipation candy, which causes permanent constipation. The canary cookie, which turns you into canary after a minute. And many more. The next day, George, carrying his luggage and with Peppa Pig as his companion, arrived at the Leaky Cauldron. Today was the first day of school, and the Ministry of Magic would be sending 2 magical vehicles to take the Weasley family to the station, so George hitched a ride. According to Arthur, his own magical vehicle was gone, and the Ministry was sending one to help him. George knew that Minister Fudge had specifically ordered an Auror to escort Harry in a magical chariot because he feared Sirius might attack Harry. Sirius's escape from Azkaban had already put Fudge under immense pressure. If the boy, who had miraculously survived, were killed by Sirius in retaliation, Fudge would lose his position as minister. To solidify his power, he even offered an exorbitant reward, 10,000 galleons for anyone who could capture Sirius. The minister's official salary was only 400 galleons a month. 10,000 galleons was an enormous sum for any wizard. I can't wait to get on the train, at least I can get away from Percy at Hogwarts. He just yelled at me again for spilling tea on that Penelope quivered picture of his. You know, that's his girlfriend. She's hiding her face behind her glasses because her nose is covered in smudges, Ron complained to his best friend Harry while carrying his luggage, wearing a collarless long-sleeved sweatshirt. He immediately waved to George standing below. Good morning, George. Good morning, Harry, Ron. George waved back. At that moment, Ginny's sullen voice came from above. Mom, I told you, I've checked, I haven't forgotten anything, stop nagging me. But seemingly hearing her brother Ron and George greet her, her attitude immediately changed. Okay, dear Mom, I'll check again. Harry, looks like you're no longer my sister's idol. Ron shrugged. Harry breathed a sigh of relief. I don't think this is a bad thing, Colin. That first-year student was already giving him a huge headache. Ginny shifting her idol only made him feel much better. It's okay, Crookshanks. I'll let you out as soon as we get on the train. Hermione, carrying her wicker basket, gently comforted the cat she'd bought yesterday, then shoved Ron aside and came down the stairs. Hey, George, you're always so punctual. No, you can't let that guy out. What will happen to my poor Scabbers? Ron straightened up and complained. However, Hermione ignored him, pulling George towards the Leaky Cauldron's exit. George, let's wait for the train outside. Did you and Ron have a fight? George asked knowingly with a smile. Watching children bicker can sometimes be quite amusing. Chapter 216 The Death of the Dementor. HMPH, serves him right for having a problem with my Crookshanks, Hermione said indignantly. He even called Crookshanks a little monster. My Crookshanks is so beautiful. Beautiful. George nodded non-committally, looking at Crookshanks' persimmon-like face. He figured most people wouldn't find Crookshanks beautiful, maybe a tiny minority would find it kind of ugly cute. Everyone has their own aesthetic sense, like Bull Terriers, Shar-Peis, American Bullies, and Cornish Rex cats. Even though they're ugly, many people still like them. However, while Crookshanks was ugly, it wasn't an ordinary cat, it had cat-like blood and could sense malice. That's why it kept chasing after Scabbers, the mouse that Pettigrew had transformed into. Hey, George, long time no see. Is this your little girlfriend? 2 Ministry of Magic cars pulled up in front of the Leaky Cauldron. Tonks, wearing a red jacket and jeans and sporting colorful hair, stepped out. Seeing George and Hermione talking together, she teased. Long time no see, Tonks. I heard you've been promoted, congratulations. George didn't mind and greeted him with a smile. He hadn't expected Tonks to be among the Aurors protecting Harry at the train station. Hermione, what happened to your face? It's not even hot today. Harry and Ron arrived at the door and couldn't help but ask when they saw Hermione's flushed face. Hermione hurriedly grabbed her luggage and boarded the train. I just wore a lot this morning. Oh, the train's here, let's hurry. The Wheel Eyes arrived at the door and, seeing the Ministry of Magic's train had arrived, immediately urged everyone to get on. The journey was smooth, and they arrived at the station without any surprises. Passing through platform 9 3/4, they boarded the Hogwarts Express, and George carried his luggage to the second year's carriage. Because they had stayed at the Leaky Cauldron the night before and had a magical car for transportation, they were among the first batch of young wizards to arrive at the station, and there was no one else in the carriage yet. Ginny naturally sat down with George in the same compartment. Not long after they sat down, Colin and Luna also boarded the train. Here. Ginny waved to the two and explained to George, I wrote to Colin and Luna beforehand, telling them to come early today so we can sit together on the way to school like last year. I see, George nodded, surprised by the coincidence. It turned out that all the coincidences were part of a pre-planned script. However, he didn't care, sitting with someone made no difference to him. Before, he was more concerned with improving his reputation so he could have better prospects after graduation. But because his strength had increased so quickly, he found that he no longer needed to care about those things. In the face of absolute power, all schemes and tricks were less efficient than a straightforward victory. Mainly, he hadn't expected his strength to change so dramatically in just 1 year. Actually, if you include the time his main body and several clones had spent there, it was far more than a year. The Hogwarts Express traveled north, the scenery outside the window becoming increasingly desolate, and as the clouds thickened, the sky gradually darkened. Around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, it started to rain, blurring the undulating mountains outside the window. The rain intensified, turning the windows a watery gray before gradually plunging into darkness. Finally, the lights in the aisle and on the luggage racks suddenly came on, the train clattered, raindrops pattered, and the wind howled outside. George flipped through his book, The Alchemy Manual, while Ginny, Luna, and Colin had fallen asleep on the table. At that moment, the train gradually slowed down, the sound of the wheels fading, and the wind and rain pounded against the windows louder than before. What's wrong? Have we arrived? Ginny groggily opened her eyes, and Luna and Colin also woke up. George put away his magic book and replied, No, there might have been some trouble with the train. He knew this was a surprise inspection by the Ministry of Magic to prevent Sirius from entering the school via the Hogwarts Express. An accident. Colin and Ginny got up and peeked out of the carriage door. The other young wizards in the compartments also peered out curiously, no one knowing what had happened. Suddenly, the train screeched to a halt, and all the lights went out for no apparent reason. A chorus of screams erupted, and George felt 2 figures leap into his arms. It was the frightened Colin and Ginny. Fluorescence. Luna calmly cast a luminous spell with her wand, illuminating the room. George, carrying Colin and Ginny by their arms, placed them on their seats and comforted them. It's all right, just a little accident, it should be fine soon. Then what happened? Colin pointed to the train window, his voice trembling. For some reason, frost had slowly formed there. It shouldn't be this cold in early July. Seeing this, Ginny threw herself into George's arms again. George patted her back reassuringly. He thought Ginny was usually quite brave, but he hadn't expected her to be so afraid of the dark. Perhaps she was still too young. This was unlike Luna. Luna seemed genuinely calm and unafraid, befitting a girl who could see thestrals. Just as George was comforting Ginny, a tall, unkempt figure suddenly appeared in the doorway. He extended a grayish-white hand, seemingly covered in slime and spots, like a withered hand that had rotted in water for a long time, and slowly pushed the door open. Then, a strange, cold, decaying head peered in, seemingly searching for something. Colin and Ginny screamed at the sight. Luna, unusually frightened, huddled next to George. That's a Dementor, the most terrifying dark creature, said to suck away souls. Hearing Luna's explanation, Colin and Ginny were even more terrified. At that moment, George slowly extended one of his hands and lit a small magic circle. Rain of light. In this world, only the Patronus charm could repel Dementors, and he wanted to test if his holy light magic would be effective against them. It wouldn't matter if it didn't work, he already knew the Patronus charm anyway. Besides, they weren't Harry, possessing Voldemort's soul fragments, so they shouldn't be vulnerable to Dementors. The arrows of light, condensed from holy light, shot directly at the Dementors. Sensing the arrows, the Dementors trembled instantly, letting out terrified screams. But before they could dodge, they were completely struck by the arrows and reduced to ashes. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217. I really didn't mean to. It's dead already. George blinked, a look of surprise on his face, as he stared at the Dementor reduced to ashes. He had only wanted to test whether fairy tales light magic had any effect on Dementors, and if so, whether he could use it like the Patronus charm to repel them or cause some damage. But he hadn't expected it to be so effective, killing them instantly with a single blow. How am I going to explain this to the Aurors? George scratched his head, feeling a bit overwhelmed. These Dementors, while dark creatures, were currently part of the Ministry of Magic's Azkaban Guard. They hadn't attacked them proactively like they had attacked Harry, they were simply on official duty on the train. Killing them like that seemed a bit odd. But then he thought again, it wasn't entirely unreasonable. He suddenly remembered that the Ministry of Magic hadn't notified Hogwarts or the students on the train about this surprise inspection. So, logically, it was normal for him to instinctively retaliate when he saw a Dementor appear at the door and stick its head in. The key question is, who can definitively say that the Dementors didn't attack them? After all, it's an undeniable fact that the Dementors attacked Harry in the third-year carriage. Seemingly hearing the Dementors' screams, those searching in other carriages left and rushed over. Dementors are intelligent dark creatures, they can communicate with wizards and are willing to cooperate with the Ministry of Magic as guards of Azkaban, obtaining a stable source of food. They even later negotiated with Voldemort to help him attack Hogwarts. So, upon discovering their companions' terrified screams before death, they naturally wouldn't ignore them. And when they entered the second-year carriage and saw the Dementor ashes outside George's room, the round mouth immediately let out an angry roar, about to suck George and the others to death. I advise you not to act rashly. Seeing this, George helplessly cast light magic again. Field of light, a dazzling light spread outwards from George, and the Dementors, sensing the threat of the holy light to their lives, scattered in fear. This scene was also witnessed by the other young wizards in the second-year carriage. With such a commotion on George's side, how could the young wizards in the same carriage not be curious and peek out to see? On the other side, the Aurors who were controlling the driver at the engine were also alerted by the unusual situation in the second carriage. Rufus Scrimgeour, the head of the Auror office, ordered several Aurors, "Go and see what's going on." Several Aurors immediately apparated to the entrance of the second carriage. Minister Umbridge is truly brilliant. Sirius Black was indeed hiding on the Hogwarts Express, a middle-aged, plump witch next to Scrimgeour, wearing a pink hair clip, a pink bow, a pink ruffled skirt, and carrying a pink umbrella, immediately brightened up when she saw the commotion in the second carriage. Scrimgeour, his face grim, said, "Second Minister Umbridge, judging from the Dementors' behavior, they probably haven't captured Sirius Black. I think it's very inappropriate for you to disregard Headmaster Dumbledore's objections and allow the Dementors to search the Hogwarts Express." He had initially disapproved of this operation, but the Minister and the Second Minister completely ignored his opinions, stubbornly believing that Sirius Black was hiding on the Hogwarts Express, and forcibly ordered him to lead the search. Umbridge's expression changed slightly, and she spoke in a harsh voice, "Scrimgeour, please remember your place. You are the head of the Auror office at the Ministry of Magic, not a Hogwarts teacher. You only need to obey the Minister and my orders. In the British wizarding world, the most powerful person is the Minister, not the headmaster of a school. You need to understand that Dumbledore is the greatest wizard of this century. His wisdom guides the wizarding world. I hope that the Minister and Deputy Minister will sometimes listen to his opinions," Scrimgeour replied firmly. Umbridge was so angry at Scrimgeour that her stomach ached, but she didn't know how to refute him. In the end, she could only snort coldly and give up. At this moment, a young Auror who had gone to investigate also apparated back. "It wasn't that we found Sirius Black, it was, what is it? Speak quickly. Why are you stammering?" When Umbridge heard that it wasn't Sirius Black, she became even angrier. Seeing the young Auror still stammering, she wanted nothing more than to expel him from the Ministry of Magic on the spot. A second-year wizard killed a Dementor and scared away the others. The young Auror quickly recounted his findings. Scrimgeour and Umbridge stared wide-eyed. "Say that again. A second-year wizard killed a Dementor? Are you sure you're not out of your mind?" Dementors, feared even by half-adult wizards, and only repelled by Patronus charms, had been killed. And by a mere second-year wizard no less. It was utterly absurd, impossible. The two strongly suspected the young Auror had been deceived. Many young wizards saw it, and it's confirmed by the Dementors that were caught, the young Auror said, though he himself didn't believe it. But that was the result of his investigation, and it wasn't just him investigating, other Aurors had reached the same conclusion. "Take us to see," Scrimgeour and Umbridge said, still unconvinced, and quickly followed the young Auror to the second-year carriage. They saw the remnants of a Dementor on the ground and George being questioned by the Aurors. "Hello, Mr. Scrimgeour," George greeted Scrimgeour first. After looking at George for a moment, Scrimgeour seemed to remember something and pointed at George, saying, You are little Dora." Although George's appearance had changed quite a bit in the past year, he still recognized him. After all, Tonks often mentioned George to him, and he had also heard about George's selection for the international Quidditch team and his receipt of the French Medal of Honor. "Now I should call you George. What happened? Did you kill the Dementors, Mr. Scrimgeour?" "I really didn't mean to." George quickly repeated the story he had made up. In other words, he didn't know that the Dementors were searching for Sirius Black, and thought that the Dementors were going to attack them, so he subconsciously used the magic he had created to fight back. He didn't expect the Dementors to be so vulnerable and killed by him. Impossible. How could someone your age create magic, let alone magic that can kill Dementors? "Are you with Sirius Black? He was hiding in your carriage just now, killed a Dementor, and jumped off to escape." Umbridge pushed aside Scrimgeour and questioned George. Chapter 218 Time Magic and Converters. "Madam, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. I don't know Sirius Black, and I'm not related to him at all. Why should I help him? If you had just asked Mr. Scrimgeour about my background, you wouldn't have made such a foolish guess." George sized up the middle-aged, plump witch in pink, roughly guessing her identity, and said in a very impolite tone, "Besides, what's so difficult about inventing new magic? I invented flight magic in my first year, so what's so strange about inventing magic that can kill Dementors? Don't compare your useless pig brain to a magical genius like me, with pure white wings unfurled behind him and golden light emanating from his domain of light surrounding him." George looked like a holy god. Not only the young wizards who gathered around, but even the Aurors were somewhat dazed. George was no longer the George of his first year, his strength no longer needed to be disguised. He could be arrogant when he wanted to, without having to put up with other people's tempers. Let alone a mere Umbridge, even Dumbledore wouldn't need to be so cautious anymore. The key point is that he claimed these spells were his own creation, and no one could refute him, because these spells weren't from this world, no one but him knew them. You, hearing George, a mere second-year wizard, dare to speak to him, the Deputy Minister of Magic, like that? Umbridge was furious. Scrimgeour, seeing Umbridge's discomfiture, was overjoyed. He deeply despised Umbridge, a deputy minister who had no real skills, only knew how to flatter and curry favor, using galleons to get promoted. Since it was an accident, let it go. You all rest well, the train will be leaving soon, and we'll arrive at Hogsmeade Station in less than an hour. No way. This kid killed a Dementor. Umbridge wasn't about to let it go so easily, but Scrimgeour interrupted him halfway through his sentence. "Minister, you must understand, we didn't find Sirius Black. For stopping the Hogwarts Express without permission and having the Dementors search the carriages, you, Minister, will have to personally apologize to Dumbledore. If you cause further trouble for the student, things will be even more difficult for you. Sending Dementors to search the Hogwarts Express without Dumbledore's permission would be fine if they found Sirius Black, but they found nothing, which is awkward. Not only Dumbledore, but the students' parents will also cause a scene. Continuing to challenge Dumbledore's bottom line at this point is something the minister definitely doesn't want to see. Dumbledore's influence in the wizarding world is no joke. And since Sirius Black wasn't found on the Hogwarts Express, the next step in the plan is to have the Dementors guard all the school entrances to prevent him from entering. If Dumbledore is angered and disagrees, the next steps will be difficult to implement. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Umbridge said nothing more, snorted, and apparated away. They weren't yet within the Hogwarts castle's perimeter, so apparition was still an option. "George, very good. Study hard at Hogwarts, and you'll definitely become a great wizard like Dumbledore." Seeing Umbridge leave, Scrimgeour patted George on the shoulder. He hadn't expected that the child who had been adopted and abused by a dark wizard would possess such terrifying magical talent, and grow to this level in just 1 year. "I'll try my best." George nodded, retracting his wings and light magic. Scrimgeour led the Aurors in retreat, the train started moving again, and George instantly became the focus of all the young wizards. For the next hour, young wizards constantly passed by his room, pretending to casually stop and peek inside. This included young wizards from other carriages who had heard the news and came over. Meanwhile, His friends Harry, Ron, and Hermione also came to his room to ask about the situation, and he learned that Harry hadn't been attacked by the Dementors. He guessed that the Dementors hadn't yet found Harry's hiding room before being drawn to him and eventually scared away. Of course, this small variable was insignificant to him. The Hogwarts Express quickly arrived at its destination. The first-year students continued their tradition by boat to the castle, while they traveled by carriage pulled by thestrals. Upon arrival at the castle, they went directly to the Great Hall for the sorting ceremony, just like last year, except that before dinner, Dumbledore spoke about a few things. The most important was that the Dementors would be guarding all the school entrances and exits until they captured Sirius Black, and he advised the young wizards not to provoke them. Secondly, he introduced the new defense against the dark arts teacher, Remus John Lupin, and the new magical creatures teacher, Rubeus Hagrid. After the party, George was about to return to the Slytherin common room when he saw Professor McGonagall call Hermione aside, and he was also stopped by Snape. "Headmaster, is there something you need?" George followed Snape up the stairs to the Great Hall, having a general idea of what was going on. Snape didn't hide anything from him, saying directly, "Dumbledore wants to see you and asks for more details about what happened on the train." "Oh, and where's Hermione?" George looked at Hermione, who was being led over by Professor McGonagall, a puzzled expression on his face. He shouldn't have brought Hermione along to ask about the train incident. Ginny, Colin, and Luna would have been more appropriate. Hermione wasn't even in the same room as him. Snape glanced at Hermione and replied, "She's not going to the headmaster's office. Professor McGonagall wants to speak with her privately." "It's a good thing, don't worry." Hearing Snape's words, George immediately realized that Professor McGonagall was going to give Hermione the Time Turner. The Time Turner, the most overpowered magical item in the world, could reset time to within 5 hours of the previous moment, and was made based on the time reversal charm. In the original books, Hermione and Harry used the Time Turner to travel back 5 hours and save Sirius Black and Buckbeak's lives. He had read many books about time magic before. Without exception, all magic books emphasize that time magic is an extremely dangerous and unstable form of magic. A mishandling of it could kill one's past and future self, causing one to completely vanish from the world, and potentially even affecting future generations and other wizards. Chapter 219 The Truth Comes Out, No More Pretense. Once upon a time, a wizard named Eloise Mintab, a silence of the Department of Mysteries, used a time turner to travel back in time during an experiment, but died because the time travel exceeded several hours. During the experiment, Eloise was trapped in 1402 for 5 days. When she finally returned to the present, her body's age had inexplicably increased by 5 centuries, causing irreparable damage, and she eventually died of old age at St. Mungo's Infirmary. Her travels altered the life trajectories of everyone she encountered in the past. At least 25 descendants disappeared from the present, becoming never born. Furthermore, there are worrying signs that past time was also disrupted. Her Tuesday in the present lasted 2.5 days, while Thursday only had 4 hours remaining. Moreover, even with normal use of the time turner, time itself still passes. For example, Hermione used the time turner to extend her study time so she could study all subjects simultaneously, almost causing her to collapse. She ostensibly studied for 8 hours, but in reality, she had studied for over 10 hours using the time turner, resulting in the fatigue of over 10 hours of studying. Using it for an extended period means that while others experience 1 year, you experience 2, meaning your age increases by 1 year. Therefore, while it might improve efficiency in learning, it's essentially borrowing time from the future. Because time tampers are extremely dangerous, the corresponding incantation, the Hour Reversal Charm, is sealed by the Ministry of Magic and cannot be learned through normal channels. All completed time tampers are sealed in the Time Hall of the Department of Mysteries at the Ministry of Magic. Due to the special nature of time tampers, the Ministry of Magic has enacted hundreds of laws surrounding them, and their use is generally not approved unless a special application is made. George is naturally very interested in time magic and time tampers, and time magic is a magic he absolutely must learn. Time magic is one of the most advanced forms of magic in any world. Even though the laws of time differ between worlds, and even if one learns time magic, it cannot change established facts, it's still excellent for improving learning efficiency. After all, he's already immortal and doesn't care about borrowing time from the future. His future time is infinite. Of course, while applying for a time tamper is easy, Learning and mastering the sealed hour reversal charm is not so simple. It seems it's time to show some real strength. After parting ways with Professor McGonagall and Hermione on the 8th floor, George followed Snape to the headmaster's office. Inside, Dumbledore was reading a Muggle-published book on knitting techniques. "Sit down first." Seeing Snape bring George in, he put down the book and gestured for them to sit. "Headmaster, the Ministry of Magic allowed Dementors to search the train without authorization, and George accidentally killed one. He did nothing wrong." Snape sat down and spoke first. He would protect his own students, especially George, who was his last disciple. Regardless of whether Dumbledore intended to blame George, it was always good to say a few words in his defense. It seems joining Slytherin was a wise choice, George thought to himself, seeing Snape's immediate support for him. Of the 4 heads of house, Snape might not be the most ethical or the most fair, but he was definitely the most protective of his own. This was one of the reasons he hadn't exposed Scabbers as Peter Pettigrew. Sirius Black is innocent and righteous, but he has no connection to Sirius Black. On the contrary, it's a fact that Sirius Black and Harry's father bullied Snape at school. Snape was certainly at fault, probably saying things he shouldn't have. But since Snape was his headmaster and always sided with him, he naturally sided with Snape. Therefore, he didn't intend to clear Sirius Black's name anytime soon. He'd let him suffer a bit, just to make Snape happy. He'd let things take their course until the end, as long as he didn't let Pettigrew go and help Voldemort resurrect. Severus, I don't mean to blame George. He did a good job killing the Dementor to protect his classmates. I just wanted to see the magic he used to kill the Dementor, Dumbledore explained with a smile. He was quite surprised when he heard from Fudgula that George had killed a Dementor with magic. Even he couldn't directly kill such a dark creature as a Dementor. Or rather, at this stage in the wizarding world, there is no way to directly kill Dementors, not even the killing curse. The Dementors and the Ministry of Magic have a cooperative relationship. The Dementors help the Ministry guard Azkaban, and the Ministry allows the Dementors to openly consume the happiness of Azkaban's prisoners. As for why the Dementors don't dare to indiscriminately consume happiness, it's because while wizards cannot kill Dementors, they can use Patronus charms to gather and imprison them in a certain place. For example, a box made with an unseen stretching charm, plus some sealing spells. This way, the Dementors can only stay in the box until they gradually dissipate due to prolonged lack of food. I heard, you created this new magic yourself. Snape turned to look at George, equally curious. Among all the students at Hogwarts, George was undoubtedly a genius among geniuses. By the end of his first year, he already possessed magical knowledge approaching that of a 7th-year wizard. He was also extremely skilled in magical duels and created a unique flight spell. Even he himself only reached a level sufficient to create his own new magic in his 5th year. To be honest, given his understanding of George's magical abilities, he was quite surprised that George could create new magic. He felt George's current level wasn't sufficient to support such a feat. However, magical creation inherently involves chance, often relying on luck rather than pure skill. Actually, not entirely, George replied slowly after a few seconds of pause, looking at Snape and Dumbledore. He was ready to lay his cards on the table and stop pretending. Originally, he planned to say he created a new spell to kill Dementors based on the Patronus charm. After all, he had indeed learned the Patronus charm from Amy and could demonstrate it immediately. But after careful consideration on the train, he realized that this explanation had too many flaws. Given Dumbledore and Snape's intelligence and understanding of magic, they probably wouldn't believe him. Chapter 220 Magic Taught by the Gods. First, given his level of magical knowledge in this world, creating a spell that could kill Dementors, a spell that had never existed before, seems a bit too exaggerated. Flight magic is somewhat plausible, since Voldemort invented one, and there's a similar record. But a spell that could kill Dementors is unprecedented, especially since he's never even seen a Dementor before, and it's not like he specifically researched magic for this purpose. It simply doesn't make sense. If you have to explain it, it could only be an accident, an accidental invention of a spell that just happened to kill a Dementor. Secondly, his fairy tale magic and the magic of this world are not the same. Many principles differ, and the forms of expression are also different. Fairy tale magic generally involves magic circles, while the magic of this world doesn't have that effect. At his current level, he can convert fairy tale magic into the magic of this world, or interpret the magic of the fairy tale world using the principles of this world's magic. An ordinary wizard might be able to fool him, But how could Snape and Dumbledore believe that he invented magic inspired by the Guardians? So, if he insists on this explanation, both of them should be able to see through his lie. In the past, he felt that even if the other party thought he was lying, he absolutely couldn't tell the truth, otherwise his life would be entirely in the other party's hands. As long as he denied it, he believed Snape would protect him, and Dumbledore wouldn't make things too difficult. But now, he felt there was no need, because he was confident in his strength. Even if Dumbledore turned against him, he wasn't without a fighting chance. He might as well show some strength. If Dumbledore thought he was the main force in the future fight against Voldemort, or even the savior who would end Voldemort, and was willing to train him with all his might, that would be great. And he wouldn't have to be on edge all the time, afraid of being discovered for anything unusual, and he wouldn't dare to use magic from other worlds. Of course, he wasn't stupid. He wouldn't expose all his secrets and say that he learned magic from other worlds, blah blah blah. Not entirely. What do you mean? Snape frowned. Could it be that George accidentally learned a lost spell from some ancient magic book and then claimed to have created it himself? If that were the case, it wouldn't be a big deal. It's normal for children to be a little vain. Slytherins are like that. Because this spell that can kill Dementors, and the previous flight spell, were actually taught to me in my sleep by an old man who claimed to be a god. And it wasn't just those two spells, he also taught me many other spells and granted me special powers. What? A god? Snape and Dumbledore's eyes widened in disbelief. They never expected George to give such an unbelievable answer. A god teaching magic in a dream? Was this a joke? Throughout history, although legends of gods have circulated, like the famous story of the Deathly Hallows, no one has ever been able to truly prove their existence. Even a powerful wizard like Dumbledore was never certain whether gods truly existed. After his sister's death, he frantically searched for a way to resurrect her and looked for information about gods, but to no avail. George, you're already incredibly talented, the best student I've ever seen. It's perfectly normal that you can't create your own magic yet. Many adult wizards can't. So just take it easy and don't worry about it too much. Snape now felt that George was definitely lying, and a very bad one at that, which made him somewhat disappointed in George. As a Slytherin, lying wasn't a big deal, but at least you had to tell a lie that could fool everyone. Even if you insisted that you created your own magic, that was fine, as long as there was no evidence, then it was your own creation. Saying that a god taught you magic in a dream was an insult to his and Dumbledore's intelligence. It might fool first and second year wizards, but it was utterly clumsy to fool him and Dumbledore. Dumbledore didn't speak, but judging from his expression, he clearly didn't believe George's story. Seeing this, George didn't waste any more words and immediately began to demonstrate. 200 million volts. Without taking out his wand, his body instantly erupted with lightning. With a wave of his hand, all the metal in the room was under his control, flying up and swirling around him. This is a physical ability given to me by the old man. I don't need to chant spells or cast magic, I can achieve it just by thinking about it. There are many more, but this room is too small to demonstrate them. Headmaster, this doesn't seem like magic. Snape looked at George, who was enveloped in lightning and various metal objects, and said to Dumbledore with a look of shock. As a top wizard, he could distinguish whether it was the effect of magic. Moreover, with George's level of magic, it was impossible for him to release magic silently and without a wand. He had never seen this form of magic before. It is indeed not magic. It seems that George might not be lying after all. Dumbledore nodded, his eyes wide. He could feel that the power of the lightning around George was considerable. But we still need to verify it further. Let's go to the Forbidden Forest. There are quite a few wizards who are born with special abilities. Just as some people are born with the ability to manipulate thoughts, some with the ability to foresee the future, and some with the ability to unleash fire magic, it's not unreasonable for George to also be born with the ability to unleash electricity. Snape nodded, casting a flight charm that turned him into a puff of black smoke. Dumbledore cast a flight charm that turned him into a white light, and George spread his wings. The three of them flew directly out of the office window. Apparition cannot be used within the boundaries of Hogwarts Castle. Even Dumbledore needs the power of the Phoenix to use it. So flying directly to the Forbidden Forest is the most convenient option, and they can fly back afterward without delaying their sleep. However, George didn't expect that Dumbledore also knew flight magic. He thought only Snape knew it, since Snape learned flight magic from Voldemort. But thinking about it carefully, it makes sense. With Dumbledore's level, If he specifically studied flight magic, it shouldn't be too difficult. It's just that he doesn't use it much normally. Even within Hogwarts, he can apparate with a phoenix, and he can go anywhere else much more easily than by flying. Soon, the three landed in a clearing far from the Forbidden Forest. Headmaster, I'll begin, George said, straightening his wizarding robes to Snape and Dumbledore. The two exchanged a glance and nodded simultaneously. Chapter 221 The Disaster That Destroyed the Entire World. This is light magic to dispel darkness, and it's also the magic I used to kill the Dementors. George didn't use his wand. A huge white magic circle instantly appeared before him. Light array, light domain, light explosion, light rain. After casting all the holy light magic, George continued with a second spell. This is giant magic. It allows me to grow to gigantic size. Magic circles lit up around him again, and his arms instantly expanded, smashing a large tree that several people had destroyed with a single punch. These are giant's fist bones. Then his entire body expanded to over 10 meters tall. This is gigantism. In this state, my strength surpasses that of giants. He clapped his hands together, creating a howling wind. His fist struck the ground, and Snape and Dumbledore felt the earth tremble. If they didn't know George was a pure human, they would have truly believed he was a giant, and a very tall one at that. Shrinking back to his normal size, he stretched out his hand and drew in the air. This is spell magic. This is a spell barrier. This is transformation magic. This is a disguise magic. This is a mimicry magic. This is a mirror world magic. After a flurry of activity, George continued, what I just demonstrated were the various spells Grandpa taught me. Now I'm demonstrating the special power Grandpa bestowed upon my body. His entire body was once again enveloped in electricity. This move is called the railgun. He reached out and pulled out a silver shuriken, which was enveloped in 200 million volts of electricity. After George aimed, it shot forward at supersonic speed with devastating force. A moment later, a wide road appeared in front of George. Snape and Dumbledore were filled with shock. Just that one move could instantly kill more than 90% of the wizards in the world. Wizards who could cast spells silently and instantly without a wand were extremely rare in the entire wizarding world. Most wizards had to wave their spells and chant incantations before casting magic, requiring at least a second of preparation time. So, faced with George's supersonic electromagnetic cannon, they had no time to cast a magical defense or counterattack. The key was that George's cannon was incredibly powerful. If they were hit, they'd probably be dead on the spot. Next up is the Thunder Giant and the enlarged version of the electromagnetic cannon. George's magnetic power exploded, and a Thunder Giant over 30 meters tall gradually took shape. Just as he was about to demonstrate the enlarged version of the electromagnetic cannon, Dumbledore quickly used the megaphone spell to shout, "No need to demonstrate anymore. We believe you. Quickly return to your original form." In the middle of the night, the commotion they just caused had probably alerted many magical creatures and native inhabitants of the Forbidden Forest. Letting George unleash that enlarged super electromagnetic cannon would be a real problem. And then there were the Aurors and Dementors surrounding the school's exits. So, he stopped George in time. After George returned to his original form, he immediately used a repair spell to repair the damaged trees nearby and flew back to the office with Snape and George. Actually, I have some more to demonstrate, George said, his eyes wide, back in the office. Dumbledore and Snape simultaneously raised their hands to stop him, saying, No need, we believe you. To be honest, both of them were still somewhat dazed. So many different spells, so many spells completely different from what they knew, all without needing wands, and also powerful. This couldn't possibly be ancient magic that George had learned from some spellbook. They had studied ancient magic before, it was just that it was slow to cast and incredibly powerful, but the principles and other aspects of magic weren't that different from modern magic. Modern magic had simply optimized ancient magic and developed new spells based on it. But the spells George cast were from a completely different system. With their level of magic, they couldn't even understand the principles, let alone that George had created them himself or learned them from spellbooks. And his Thunder Giant and Railgun were simply beyond their comprehension. So, apart from George's claim that the magic was imparted by the gods, they really couldn't think of any other reason to explain all this. After calming down for a long while, Dumbledore finally spoke to George, asking, Did the god reveal his identity? Did he tell you why he taught you magic? He now believed about 70–80% of George's story, but some doubts remained. George was prepared for this question from Dumbledore. The old man didn't tell me who he was, only that he was a god. He taught me magic because a great catastrophe will befall the world in 20 years, a catastrophe that could wipe out all of humanity. He said I was chosen by him, born to deal with that catastrophe that would exterminate all of humanity. What? Snape and Dumbledore's pupils constricted simultaneously. What kind of catastrophe? The extinction of all humanity. Even if Voldemort were to rise from the dead and rule the world, it wouldn't be possible for all of humanity to be wiped out. What kind of terrible catastrophe would occur in 20 years to wipe out all of humanity? At this moment, Snape and Dumbledore's focus was no longer on the god, but on the catastrophe itself. George cleared his throat and began his elaborate charade. Actually, I'm not entirely sure either, and I don't really understand it. I'll just summarize what the old man said. He told me that outside our planet, there's a much larger universe, with many more advanced civilizations than us. Like the Xander civilization, the Kree Empire, the Skrull Empire, and, he talked for a full 3 hours, until 2 a.m., before finally finishing his fabricated story. He could only say it was fortunate that this world didn't have anything related to Marvel, allowing him to use Marvel stories to fool Snape and Dumbledore. So, you're saying that 20 years from now, an alien called Thanos will lead his cosmic army to invade Earth and exterminate humanity, and the gods taught you magic so you could defeat them and protect Earth and humanity. Snape's expression was blank. The amount of information George was giving him was overwhelming, making it impossible for him to process and understand. As a Slytherin wizard, he knew very little about Muggles, and naturally, he had little concept of the universe or aliens. His understanding of the universe was mostly limited to astronomical magic, such as using stars for divination. But what George said sounded very real. Those alien empires, those spaceships, and their abilities and civilizations, it didn't sound fake at all. Chapter 222 The Real Savior is George. Dumbledore shared the same sentiment, though he was much better at it than Snape. He had a deep understanding of many things about Muggles. After all, Grindelwald's prediction of World War II had indeed come true, and Muggles had even invented terrifying nuclear weapons. Naturally, he would spend time studying Muggle matters. Mainly, he didn't have classes and was mostly free, with plenty of time to spare. So he could roughly understand what George was saying. I didn't expect that what those Muggles said about the universe and alien civilizations was actually true. It's just a pity that their technology is too backward compared to civilizations in the universe. They can't be of much help. Dumbledore sighed, then looked at George and said, George, don't tell anyone about this yet, to avoid causing panic. It's very late now, you should go back and rest. Okay, then headmaster, I'll go back. George obediently nodded and turned to leave the headmaster's office. It should be fine. After leaving the headmaster's office, George recalled Snape and Dumbledore's expressions and thought to himself. He fabricated this catastrophe not for fun, but to ensure Snape and Dumbledore would wholeheartedly support him in the future. If they believed him and considered him the chosen savior, even if they didn't obey him completely, they wouldn't refuse his requests for magical training. For example, they could help him apply for a time turner or teach him the faithful charm and Hephaestus's blessing. Even if they were skeptical, it wouldn't be a bad thing. At worst, things would remain the same. There would be no loss. They wouldn't see him as an enemy. His performance in the Forbidden Forest wasn't just a display of magic, but also a demonstration of strength. He wanted Dumbledore to understand that even if he didn't believe, he couldn't push the powerful George to the opposite side, to Voldemort's side. However, he estimated that the problem shouldn't be too serious. Dumbledore was a believer in fate, otherwise, he wouldn't have been cultivating Harry, the prophesied savior. As for what would happen if there was no alien invasion 20 years later, that could be dealt with 20 years from now. By then, his strength would probably be beyond that concern. If absolutely necessary, he could even stage an alien invasion of Earth himself for everyone's amusement. Severus, what do you think? After George left, Dumbledore turned to Snape. Snape wanted to answer that he couldn't understand anything, because he was still completely bewildered. There were many things he simply couldn't comprehend. I don't think George would lie. You saw the magic he displayed in the Forbidden Forest just now. It was incredibly powerful. That's not magic that should exist in this world. Besides the gods, I can't think of anyone who could teach him such powerful magic. And so many details about the disaster, I don't think someone his age and understanding could fabricate such a thing in a short time. George was his favorite student, and he was more inclined to believe that everything George said was true. Yes, just now in the Forbidden Forest, for a moment, I even felt that Voldemort's problem was no longer a problem. Dumbledore couldn't help but sigh. Based on George's performance just now, he felt that even Voldemort in his prime might not be a match for him. His long-standing worry about Voldemort's resurrection didn't seem like such a troublesome matter anymore. Voldemort was no match for him, but Voldemort was unkillable due to his special dark magic, and he was also old. His concern was that if he died and Voldemort were to resurrect, who could stop him? That's why he had been keeping a close eye on Harry, the prophesied child, wanting to nurture him and eventually eliminate the Dark Lord. But now, compared to the purple demon George spoke of, who could potentially destroy the entire Earth, the Dark Lord seemed insignificant, and his plot appeared childish. If what George said was true, then perhaps he needed to adjust his plans. But was what George said true? He couldn't be sure, nor could he deny it. He could only treat it as true for now, as it involved the safety of all humanity. "What are your plans?" Snape asked, seeing Dumbledore deep in thought. Dumbledore stroked his beard, picked up a toffee from the table, popped one into his mouth, and after finishing it, said, "Since the gods have made the arrangements, let's proceed as usual and trust that they can resolve the great catastrophe 20 years from now. If he has any needs, try to fulfill them as much as possible. Tell him I'm usually quite free in my office, and if he has any questions about magic, he can come to me anytime. Although I'm certainly not as good as the gods who taught him, the magic they taught him is very different from ours. Learning more is always helpful." Even if what George said was true, there was nothing he could do. He couldn't possibly reform the entire wizarding world and then unite Muggles to deal with the crisis 20 years from now. If he could, he would have done it already. Although he was recognized as the most powerful wizard, there were many things he couldn't do and was powerless to change. He was merely slightly stronger than the average wizard. All he could do was nurture George as much as possible and trust in the god's choice. It would also be a good opportunity to get to know him better and further confirm whether what George said was true. The next morning, as soon as George arrived at the Great Hall, he was met with stares from the young wizards. He was used to this. He'd been quite the star last year, and this had happened frequently. This year, however, it was more exaggerated. From the younger to the older students, almost all the young wizards looked at him with awe. The reason, of course, was that he had killed a Dementor on the train the day before. For young wizards, the existence of a Dementor was like the monkey their parents often talked about as children, a truly terrifying being. You wouldn't be afraid of a monkey as you grew up because you knew it was a non-existent creature, but a Dementor was something you would discover not only existed, but even your parents feared it like a tiger. It's important to know that the Patronus Charm, a high-level spell, wasn't something every wizard knew. In the Middle Ages, anyone who could use the Patronus Charm was considered exceptionally talented and thus gained a high status. Therefore, most wizards, when encountering a Dementor, could only become food, utterly powerless to resist. "George, come to my office after you finished breakfast." He had barely sat down and hadn't even opened his mouth when he heard Snape's voice. Chapter 223 Fusion of Plasma Cannons and Electromagnetic Cannons. In Headmaster Slater's office, Snape relayed Dumbledore's words to George. "The headmaster and I believe what you've said and will do our best to help you learn magic and improve your strength to better prepare for the crisis 20 years from now." "That's wonderful. I was hesitant to say this before because I was afraid you wouldn't believe me. After all, these things are so absurd, sometimes even I can't believe it myself." George's eyes lit up, and he didn't hold back, hinting to Snape, "Everything else is fine, but I have to practice the magic my grandfather taught me every day, and I also have to learn the school's magic. I always feel like I don't have enough time." "Not enough time? That's all right. I'll help you apply for a time turner. That should solve your problem." Snape waved his hand, replying without hesitation. With George's talent, normally he would apply for a time turner for him next year when he's in his third year. This is just a year earlier. With a time turner, George can free up more time to improve his strength while attending classes. Originally, there were only 20 years to improve his strength, but now, if the time turner is used to its fullest potential, it's equivalent to having 40 years to improve. Dumbledore would likely agree. The time turner? George feigned ignorance, but Snape quickly provided an explanation. Through Snape's explanation, George gained a more detailed understanding of the time turner. The time turner can reverse time by a maximum of 5 hours at a time, and after each reversal, it cannot be reversed immediately. time must return to normal. That is, for example, if I use the time turner to reverse time from 5 a.m. to midnight, I cannot immediately use it again to reverse 5 hours back to 7 p.m. the previous night. Secondly, when I use the time turner to reverse time to midnight, and then from midnight to 5 a.m., I cannot use the time turner, I must wait until after 5 a.m. For example, at 6 a.m., I can reverse time by a maximum of 1 hour, at 7 a.m., I can reverse time by 2 hours, and only at 10 a.m. can I reverse 5 hours back to 5 a.m. Because according to the time laws of this world, only 2 versions of oneself can exist at the same time, not 3. Therefore, even with maximum use, the time gain is at most doubled. However, these time laws are not fixed laws of this world, but rather the safest, most stable laws established by the Ministry of Magic based on its research into the time converter, ensuring no problems will occur. Of course, one can deviate from these laws. For example, I could reverse 12 hours, or reverse them consecutively, resulting in 7 or 8 versions of myself at the same time. If I'm lucky, I can remain unharmed. If I'm unlucky, I might disappear, or even endanger my family, friends, ancestors, and descendants, like the wizard named Eloise Mentab. George has already achieved immortality and possesses an infinite lifespan, so he's not afraid of suddenly aging 5 centuries, but he also doesn't want time distortions to cause chaos or the collapse of the world. Therefore, before fully understanding time magic, he will definitely use the time converter correctly. Having twice the time is already very good for him. Outside of class, he can do more things without being confined to the classroom. As for sleep, after achieving immortality, he doesn't need to sleep as much as a normal person. 1 or 2 hours a day is enough to maintain a normal state. But he can't go without sleep indefinitely. Not sleeping won't kill him, but it will severely damage his mental state and affect his studies. After a normal day of classes, Snape approached George again in the evening, handing him the time turner and giving him a second instruction on its use. He was deeply concerned that George might misuse the time turner and endanger his life. From that day forward, George embarked on a frenzied study spree. His time turner spun in nearly 5 times a day, operating at its limits. Aside from regular classes and time in the library, he spent most of his time in the headmaster's office, learning magic not taught in the classroom. Since Dumbledore had so much free time, how could he miss such a golden opportunity? In terms of magical prowess, who in this world could compare to Dumbledore? His magical skills in this world were also improving rapidly. He became even more proficient in the spells he already knew, and was gradually mastering the spells he hadn't yet learned. He even learned some new ancient magic from Dumbledore, such as the mountain-moving curse, the rain curse, and the tornado curse. In the end, even Dumbledore was finding George's excessive enthusiasm for learning somewhat overwhelming. Although he didn't have to attend classes, he wasn't completely idle. Coupled with his age, his energy sometimes waned, and being constantly bombarded with questions from George left him mentally exhausted. Fortunately, George wasn't unreasonable. After Dumbledore spoke with him, he made some adjustments, allocating some time to professors like Snape and McGonagall. These professors, while having classes, also had spare time. While Harry Potter's clone was in full-on study mode, his panda clone in the Wizarding Apprentice world also made new progress. Previously, in his desire to quickly reach level 500 and achieve immortality, the panda clone spent most of his time meditating to improve his wizarding level. Having recently reached level 500, he reduced his meditation time and began to focus more on learning magic from Balthazar. And today, he finally learned Merlin's strongest spell, the plasma cannon spell. Wizards in this world share a common weakness: they are extremely vulnerable to electric shocks. An electric current entering their bodies causes their magic to spiral out of control, rendering them unable to resist. Therefore, magicians generally prefer to wear insulated leather shoes and clothing. George didn't have this worry. His magic power stemmed from his wizarding bloodline, and meditation was more like raising the level of his magic power based on that bloodline. His control over magic power far surpassed that of the native magicians of this world. Besides, he was now an electrician himself, capable of releasing 200 million volts of electricity at will, so why would he be afraid of being electrocuted? David was able to defeat Morgana by using scientific instruments to create a large number of electric shocks, preventing Morgana's magic power from functioning properly, and then unleashing a plasma electromagnetic cannon like a machine gun. Normally, even Balthazar could only fire one at a time, although his was much larger and more powerful than David's. George had just learned this magic and could only condense one at a time, and its size was about the same as David's, about the size of an egg. However, he was now a level 4 ability user, capable of using 200 million volts of electricity. So he was considering whether he could create an even more powerful attack method if he could fuse the electromagnetic cannon with this plasma cannon magic. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224 The Power of the Plasma Electromagnetic Gun. If the two could be combined, it could be called a plasma electromagnetic cannon, or an electromagnetic plasma cannon. To simplify further, it could be called a plasma electric cannon or an electromagnetic plasma cannon. Let's give it a try. He apparated directly to a deserted clearing on the outskirts of New York, pre-setting up Muggle shielding charms and spell barriers, and began his attempt. Plasma cannon. He clasped his hands together, then slowly opened them, and an egg-sized plasma ball gradually appeared in his palms. Normally, he would simply aim the plasma ball at the target and fire it, completing the spell. But he didn't. While maintaining the plasma ball, his body was instantly enveloped in electricity, and he then manipulated the current to slowly inject power into the plasma ball from his hands. As he injected power, the plasma ball grew larger and larger, expanding from the size of an egg to the size of an apple, and then slowly from the size of an apple to the size of a pear. Unfortunately, before he could continue injecting power, due to a miscalculation, the entire plasma ball exploded, creating a crater several meters deep in the ground. Fortunately, his physique was strong, and he could control electricity, so he wasn't injured. After his first failed attempt, he didn't give up but continued trying. Fusing superpowers and magic to create a new technique wasn't easy. This was different from his previous combination of ancient magic and the Thunder Giant. That combination was essentially just releasing a large amount of lightning using ancient magic, then having the Thunder Giant absorb the lightning's power to strengthen itself. Even without ancient magic, releasing a large amount of lightning for the Thunder Giant to absorb could achieve a similar effect. It wasn't very sophisticated. After repeated attempts and failures, George had his main body and his clones and other worlds temporarily put aside their current affairs and focused their main energy on developing the electric cannon. 5 days later, because all 5 bodies were working on it simultaneously, plus the time turner in the Harry Potter world, it was equivalent to 6 bodies working on it at the same time, for a total of about 30 days. He finally created the electric cannon, a new technique combining superpowers and magic. Plasma electromagnetic cannon. Standing on the open ground, he pulled out a plasma cannon the size of an egg, injecting electricity into it until it was the size of 2 basketballs, then slammed it forward. Instantly, the cannon, the size of 2 basketballs, shot out a beam of plasma that slammed into a small mountain over 300 meters high. The mountain instantly vaporized, creating a large hole. But the power of the plasma electromagnetic cannon didn't stop there, because the plasma beam didn't disappear but remained in that state. George controlled the plasma beam in his hands, swinging it left and right, and the mountain was actually sliced in half by the plasma beam. The effect of this plasma electromagnetic cannon magic was very similar to the ultimate move of the little girl who could set off fire in a mobile game he had played in his previous life. Except that little girl set off a pillar of fire, while he set off a pillar of plasma. About 10 seconds later, the plasma beam disappeared, and George breathed a slight sigh of relief. Maintaining the plasma column continuously is no easy feat. After so many days of research and practice, he could only sustain it for a maximum of 10 seconds. However, he was still very satisfied with its power. Once his superpower level reached level 5, the power would be even greater. It's a pity I can't use it in Thunder Giant form, George sighed regretfully, looking at the destroyed hill in the distance. He imagined that if he could unleash this plasma electromagnetic cannon with the aid of ancient magic and the Thunder Giant, he could probably instantly kill any ordinary 10 wizard saints. The Thunder Giant's principle is to use electromagnetic force to attract iron, sand and rock from the ground, ultimately releasing an enlarged version of the electromagnetic cannon. The plasma electromagnetic cannon, however, integrates all its electricity into the plasma cannon, making it impossible to condense a Thunder Giant or absorb ancient magic lightning. However, This problem wasn't insurmountable. If his superpower could be upgraded from level 4 to level 5, he could allocate half of his electricity to condense a thunder giant and the other half to fuse with a plasma cannon, performing both simultaneously. Finally, he could absorb ancient magic lightning to enhance the overall power. This way, they could unleash the ultimate plasma cannon, powerful enough to destroy a city. No rush, take your time, George paraded back to David's lab beneath the subway. Next, we need to learn the soul separation charm and the soul sealing charm. The soul separation charm is a spell that can separate a person's soul from their body. Balthazar used this spell to extract Morgana's soul from Veronica's body. If George wanted to get the resurrection charm from Morgana, he had to release her alone. Otherwise, with Balthazar and David with him, it would be difficult to interrogate her for the resurrection charm. If you released Morgana alone, he had to consider two aspects. The first was combat. He needed the strength to defeat Morgana alone. This wasn't a big problem. His plasma cannon was far more powerful than David's machine gun plasma cannon, and one shot would basically end Morgana. The main issue is the second aspect. He needed to separate Morgana's soul from Veronica's body first. He couldn't kill Veronica as well. Therefore, he must learn the most difficult soul magic of the Merlin school. Since he's going to learn the soul separation charm, he can naturally learn the soul sealing charm as well, which he sees as a very useful spell. If he encounters something unkillable in the future, he can simply seal it away. However, he's never encountered soul magic before, so learning it might take a considerable amount of time. But that's alright, since he doesn't have an urgent need for these spells right now, he can take his time. Perhaps he can also find knowledge related to soul magic from his clones and other worlds, thus helping him master these soul spells more quickly. For example, the dark magic Voldemort used to split his soul to create Horcruxes. Of course, he wouldn't be foolish enough to learn Voldemort's soul-splitting technique and become insane, but he can learn and draw inspiration from the soul-related knowledge. Actually, thinking about it carefully, his splitting his soul to create clones in the various worlds and Voldemort's soul-splitting technique to create Horcruxes are quite similar. Each of his clones in the various worlds is equivalent to a Horcrux, as long as one is alive. He can't die. Chapter 225 Superpower Academy undergoes major upgrade. Marvel Universe, Superpower Academy. Finally finished the plasma electromagnetic cannon, after 5 consecutive days of sleeping only 1 hour a night, and testing the plasma electromagnetic cannon's effects with his panda clone, George finally breathed a long sigh of relief. Next, it's time to properly upgrade the school. He had been considering upgrading the school for some time, both technologically and magically. In terms of magic, his magical abilities had improved rapidly, and he had learned many new spells. With a new wand made by the World Tree, the effectiveness of his spells had been greatly enhanced. As for technology, with Banner and Betty, 2 tech geniuses, the school's outdated equipment could finally be upgraded. It wasn't that the equipment left by Beast was bad. In fact, many of the school's facilities were revolutionary even by today's standards. Like the X-Fighter, and the combat simulation room that even Tony had seen and praised as incredibly powerful. However, times change, and some things could be replaced with better ones to achieve better results. Just as Howard Stark had discovered a new element but couldn't create it due to the overall technological limitations of the time, Tony Stark could easily do so in his era. Even if you have the technology to build a computer, you still couldn't build one in ancient times using bronze artifacts. Therefore, Banner and Betty's research and creative abilities might not match Beast's, but they could easily upgrade the school's overall facilities. Leaving the room and going outside the school, it was morning, and the students were still in class. Professor X had discovered several more children with special abilities and, with George's consent, had admitted them to the school, slowly increasing the student population. Reaching the school gate, George waved away the Muggle blocking charm and the spell barrier. He now had a better option than learning magic from Dumbledore. Loyalty. George waved his wand, casting the loyalty charm over the entire school. The loyalty charm was a much more powerful spell than the Muggle blocking charm. The Muggle shielding charm only shields Muggles, that is, ordinary people. It's essentially a subtle psychological suggestion that makes ordinary people ignore houses protected by the Muggle shielding charm when they approach them. In SHIELD terms, it's a strange magnetic field interfering with the brain. It has virtually no effect on people with magic or strong psychic abilities, and it's not difficult to break using technology. But the faithful charm is different. This extremely complex and advanced charm, in George's view, has established a rule of magic. This rule stipulates that, except for the Secret Service, no one else can detect a building protected by the faithful charm, regardless of whether they use magic detection or advanced technology. The world has countless rules, and the faithful charm only slightly modifies one of them. Unmappable. After casting the faithful charm, George began casting the second charm, the unmappable charm. This is also a very advanced charm involving rules. Its effect is to make the target disappear from all maps of the world. Magical schools like Hogwarts all use this kind of spell to make it impossible for muggles to find the school, thus protecting the students' safety. After casting the two advanced spells, George spread his wings and flew into the air to begin redefining the enchanted barrier. This time, the enchanted barrier he set up was purely for defense. The first two spells prevented enemies from finding the school's location, but if an indiscriminate, large-scale attack were launched on all nearby areas, the school would still be covered. Once the barrier was set up, he flew directly to the open space in front of the school castle, where rows of hundreds of enormous metal statues stood, all custom-made by Tony using the finest alloys. Among them were dragons, three-headed hellhounds, hydras, nine-tailed foxes, bison, quay, phoenixes, killen, teoti, and various other mythical creatures from both east and west. Mimetic transformation. Holding his wand, George approached each of the metal statues and cast the mimicry transformation spell, bringing them to life. Given George's mastery of mimicry and transformation magic, it would normally be impossible to mimic such a large piece of metal and imbue it with magical power. However, with his new wand, which amplifies magic by more than 20 times, he could easily do so. Unfortunately, the amplification effect of wands in the Harry Potter world has its limits. It cannot amplify infinitely, reaching a maximum of only 20 times. Otherwise, logically, a wand made from the World Tree and the heart and nerves of the Frost Giant King should have a much stronger amplification effect than Fairy Tale's wand, but in reality, the difference is not significant. The main reason is that the level of magic in the Harry Potter world is limited, and wand technology can only reach that level. Even with superior materials, it cannot compensate for the technological gap. Even the best electric fan cannot match the cooling effect of an air conditioner. Moreover, as his magical power increases later on, the amplification effect of his wand will decrease accordingly. It's impossible that he has already surpassed the level of the Skyfather, capable of destroying a planet with a single spell, and his wand can still provide a magical amplification of more than 20 times, that would far exceed the limits of wands. So, if there aren't any new technologies to improve wands in the future, wands will eventually become obsolete. The advantage is that he won't be limited by wands anymore. Even if his newly created clones don't have wands, they can still unleash their strongest power. All his clones in all worlds will have the same strength. Right now, because of the wands, his Marvel original is the strongest, followed by his fairy tale clone, then Harry Potter and the Wizarding Apprentice worlds are about the same, and the new Masaka clone is the weakest because it doesn't have a wand. George, your magic is pretty good, even more interesting than the magic in our Asgard. Just as George finished casting his mimicry transformation spell and hadn't had time to scatter the metal statues throughout the school, he heard a familiar voice behind him. It was Thor, the hammer god, holding a copy of War Elegy. He had been at the school with George for a while now, and every day he either listened to Professor X's political lectures, Steve's stories, or listened to everyone's suggestions to read some world classics and watch some war movies. Thor, how have you been lately? Have you tried picking up the hammer? George waved his hand to disperse the metal statues and asked Thor with a smile. Thor immediately nodded. I've learned a lot, and I can understand why Father God is unwilling to wage war again. I tried it this morning, and the hammer has started to shake. If nothing unexpected happens, I should be able to pick up Mjolnir and regain all my power in the next few days. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.